What's up guys, this is your favorite fanfic YouTuber, the Fanfic Majesty, and welcome to another amazing video. You can follow me on Patreon for exclusive stories. 5 Chains. Chapter 101 White Bear's Dinner. Advertise here. As night falls, the Black Pearl is moored quietly on the sea, gently swaying with the occasional undulating waves. The hull and the sea water rub against each other, making a rustling sound. The deck that was bustling during the day was extremely quiet at this time, as if the whole world had fallen into a deep sleep. Only a few ninjas from the Shadow Legion were working and cleaning silently. Their figures were like ghosts, moving lightly between the decks. On the second floor of the Black Pearl, the restaurant is filled with warm and soft orange light. At this time, both sides of the rectangular table were full of people. The platelets put on clothes with cute little cloth pockets. They listened to the instructions energetically and carefully laid out the tableware needed for today's dinner. Their busy figures and focused expressions make people feel a warm atmosphere of home. The people sitting in various positions have already been looking forward to it. Some of them are lying on the table, some are leaning on the backs of chairs, and some are standing up. Their eyes are all gathered at the entrance of the restaurant. Here it comes. Xiao He, who heard the movement outside, jumped up and pointed excitedly towards the entrance and shouted. Only steady footsteps were heard in the distance, and the figures of Tren and Big Wolf gradually appeared in everyone's field of vision. So everyone is looking forward to me so much. Then let's just eat the stew as usual tonight. Tren looked at everyone and said with a smile. Captain Tren. Haha. Okay. Tren smiled and waved to everyone, and then he and Big Wolf stepped aside to let the people behind them out. Bai Shang now put on a white chef uniform, holding cooking tools, and a smile on his face. White Bear is back. What do you want to eat tonight? White Bear's voice was loud and powerful, instantly igniting everyone's enthusiasm. There must be a state banquet tonight. Seeing White Bear, Li Jing shed tears in emotion, he choked and said, White Bear, you don't know what kind of life we lived before. Li's taste buds are almost numb. After finishing speaking, he wiped his tears with his sleeves and showed a happy smile. Patrick on the side heard that there was delicious food, and immediately jumped up with excitement and raised his hands. Wow. I want to eat delicious food tonight. When SpongeBob saw this, he took out a spatula from his pocket and waved it in the air and said, I'm going to strike. It seems that he can't wait to show off his cooking skills. Squidward smiled gracefully and said softly, we need red wine for dinner tonight. The rest of the people also cheered and gathered around, their eyes shining with joy, to greet the long-lost chef. They believe that with the addition of the White Bear, tonight's dinner will be especially delicious. However, Ice Bear didn't say much because it was dinner time, so he acted quickly, took SpongeBob, the sous chef, into the kitchen and started busy preparing dinner. There is a faint aroma permeating the kitchen, which makes people salivate. Various ingredients and condiments are neatly placed on the table, waiting to be cooked into delicious dishes. Bai Shang skillfully cuts and stir-fries vegetables, and his movements are smooth and fluid, just like a gorgeous performance. SpongeBob is studying seriously on the side, and will make some interesting suggestions from time to time. If he doesn't use his hands, his ability to help in the kitchen is also very powerful. He skillfully operated the pots and pans, and the fire burned vigorously, emitting bursts of heat. At the restaurant, Taran and others have just sat down, and even Platelet, who has finished his work, is sitting quietly at their own small dining table. Everyone's faces were filled with excitement and anticipation, as if they had already smelled the aroma of delicious food. What if it weren't for the chef? Tron, Big Wolf and SpongeBob would all have to go through a busy dinner in front of Grandmaster's White Bear with all kinds of cooking skills, and it would only take an hour. I saw carefully prepared dishes being brought to the table by the ninjas of the Shadow Legion. They were delicious in color, flavor and mouth-watering. The leader of the group, Tren, sat at the head of the dining table. He looked at the table full of delicious food, his eyes shining with satisfaction. Tren raised his wine glass and paid tribute to the White Bear who had just sat down. No more words, no more chatter, welcome back our chef White Bear. Gourmet food. This is what I should eat. Timo and the 3 generals of Bikini Castle sat together. They couldn't wait to taste the food, with happy smiles on their faces. This king of cooking is really incomparable. Big Grey Wolf, you are already very powerful. Grey Wolf and Sadako sat quietly aside, their eyes full of expectation and curiosity. The dumplings became small and bounced between the dining tables. From time to time, they would run into someone's arms, feed them and taste the dishes, and then squint their eyes to enjoy the delicious food. What delicious food in the world! Look at it, Big Wolf. Li Jing burst into tears again. Haha, I remember that someone also commented on my craftsmanship in the same way at the beginning. This is different. This is the craft of a real chef. The dinner was in full swing, and everyone sat around the table, enjoying the delicious food and the joyful atmosphere. White Bear smiled and watched everyone eating with gusto, and his heart was full of satisfaction and pride. Because he knows that his abilities are not suitable for fighting, but he can bring the warmth and happiness of home to everyone after the battle. Taran, who was sitting in the main seat, looked at the expressions and gestures of the members on both sides of the long table and couldn't help but take a sip of the wine in his glass. Deputy Leader Li Jing, former combatant and now gardening pruner Sadako, Sniper Timo, Inventor Grey Wolf who was more suitable for combat. The musician Squidward who only knows how to play the flute, the leftover cleaning master Patrick Star, the ship's Dr. Danzy, the sous chef SpongeBob who only knows how to make delicious crab burgers, and now the chef White Bear. As well as the all-round model worker Shadow Army and the team's logistics platelets. Now, the Tron Adventure Group has one more piece of the puzzle. I don't know how lively it will be in the future. Tren muttered to himself. Captain, Root. At this time, Xiaohei stood on the table and patted the table. Haha, I almost missed you. Looking at little Heteron, he habitually pushed his little head with his fingers. Captain, I know, just choose the nearest route. Tren said casually, and then continued to talk to everyone. Xiaohei touched his chin, the closest one. Then the closest one. ... After dinner, everyone went back to their rooms to rest. The Black Pearl was really quiet this time, leaving only the gentle sound of waves and the occasional call of seagulls. White Bear is back. White Bear was lying on his bed, thinking about everything tonight. His heart was full of satisfaction and expectation, so he fell into sleep while thinking about tomorrow's dishes. Chapter 102 Bounty, New Partner Picture. Advertise here. The next morning, the sun rose, and wisps of golden sunlight spilled into the room through the gaps in the curtains. Tren sleepily got up from the soft and comfortable big bed, stretched, then rubbed his eyes, and got out of bed to wash up. After washing up, he dragged his body, which was not fully powered on, to the restaurant on the second floor. Due to some force majeure reasons, Tren, as the core figure of the team, became the last person to wake up. Of course, if you exclude Timo who went back to catch up on his sleep. At this moment, the restaurant was already bustling with laughter and laughter. Ice Bear has already completed various breakfast preparations and is sitting leisurely on a chair, drinking milk and reading the day's newspapers. When Tren walked in, Bai Xiong raised his head and greeted him with a smile. Good morning, Captain. Then, White Bear put down the newspaper in his hand and said softly, White Bear and everyone have finished eating. Come over and have breakfast. Yeah, Tren nodded and walked to the White Bear and sat down as usual. He raised his head and glanced at the noisy crowd, frowning slightly. What's wrong with them? It's so early in the morning. White Bear thinks it has something to do with this. White Bear directly handed over the newspaper in his hand. Newspaper. Tren, who took over, asked smoothly, today's. Seeing Bai Xiong nodding, Tren unfolded the newspaper and started reading. And this newspaper can be said to be the column of their Tren Adventure Group. Pure evil, the danger and terror of the Tron Adventure Group. The new Emperor of the Sea. Jenny Tron. The stories that the three great generals and the fake generals have to tell. World government's latest notice to various countries. The whole page is about detailing their crimes. At the same time, the bounty update after the Battle of Red Harbor is also included. This time the update is very large. White Bear, are you in there too? Didn't you just arrive yesterday? Tren said with some surprise as he looked at the wanted poster. Yeah, Ice Bear didn't expect that either. Ice Bear smiled and scratched his head, then said, but Ice Bear is very happy because he can be with everyone. Haha, looking at the cute look of the White Bear, Tren couldn't help laughing. Then he glanced at the reward orders scattered on the table and said with a frown. After being promoted to this level, it seems that the world government wants me to be restless even in the new world. Tren Adventure Group, Leader. Pure, Evil, Jenny. Tren, Bounty, 3.4 billion Bailey. I don't think the leader would be worried about this, but I think Ice Bear's name is very strange. Tren Adventure Group, Chef, Naked White Bear, Bounty, 50 million Baileys. No, I've obviously been caught off guard once or twice. Why do you still have this title? Li Jing furiously hammered the wall. The most important thing is why am I lower than you? I am the deputy commander. At this moment, Big Wolf came over triumphantly, with a proud smile on his face, and said provocatively to Li Jing, haha, because I am the Big Wolf King. Tren Adventure Group, Deputy Leader, Sword Demon Li Jing, Bounty, 2,020 million Baileys. Tren Adventure Group, Inventor, Shadow Wolf King Big Wolf, Bounty, 2.21 billion Baileys. In the small room, Timo, who was already sleeping, turned over. Tren Adventure Group, Sniper, Ghost Agent Timo, Bounty, 760 million belly. Looking at the messy restaurant, Sadako patted Danzy on the head and said, let's go to the boat top forest garden. See what we need today. Tren Adventure Group, Garden Pruner, Cursed Ghost Sadako, Bounty, 650 million Baileys. Yeah, Tuanzi nodded and jumped up. Tren Adventure Group, Ship Doctor and Pet, Mountain God Dumpling, Bounty of 310 million Baileys. He, look at it, Patrick, I'm worth money again. SpongeBob laughed while holding his wanted poster. Tren Adventure Group, Sous Chef, Fake General Huang Mian, Bounty, 1.65 billion Baileys. Me too, SpongeBob, Patrick said and ate his wanted poster. Tren Adventure Group, Artistic Star, False General Akahoshi, Bounty, 1.65 billion Bailey. Oh, two fools. Looking at the two of them, Squidward sighed, and then he admired his wanted poster. I'm still as calm and handsome as ever. I'll find a photo frame to frame it later. Tren Adventure Group, a musician who can only play the flute, fake General Qingzong, bounty, 1.65 billion Baileys. So far, the Tren Adventure Group has become the group with the highest total bounty on the sea, especially in the New World, and has directly become the target of public criticism. At the same time, the Black Pearl sailed in a straight line and never deviated from its course under Tren's latest order yesterday. Since the shortest route was chosen, the speed was very fast. But what is surprising is that just after last night and this morning, a huge island appeared in the Black Pearl's sight. This island looked like an independent continent, and its appearance did not allow Tron to react, because at this time, it set a record for the fastest route in the history of the Black Pearl. We're here now. Tron, who was standing on the deck, looked at the island in front of him and frowned. While controlling the virtual screen, Xiaohe replied, "Yes, this is not because of the order you issued yesterday, Captain." Tren still felt a little unbelievable, and he muttered, "That's too fast." Then he said to Xiaohe worriedly, "No, show me." After saying that, he stretched out his finger and gently tapped Xiaohe's head. Xiaohe raised his little hand very cooperatively, grabbed the virtual screen in front of him, and then quickly swung it towards Tren. In the blink of an eye, the virtual screen that could only be viewed by Xiaohe suddenly enlarged and was completely displayed in front of Tren. Tren stared at the map information displayed on the virtual screen carefully and whispered, "Cassia Island." This name was not familiar to him. "What's wrong, Captain?" Looking at Tren, Xiaohe raised his head and asked, "Or do we need to change the route and replan?" "No need to go to such trouble, we're all here anyway." Tren waved his hand, "We're all here, let's go and take a look." Then, he decisively removed the virtual screen in front of him and ordered the Black Pearl to dock. Chapter 103 Cassia Island. Advertise here. Cassia Island is located among the many islands in the eastern New World. This island is covered with dense vegetation, presenting a vibrant scene. The specialties and exports here are mainly various precious botanical medicinal materials, cooking spices, etc. These resources make Cassia a unique and prosperous place. And this small island is dotted with dozens of quiet towns. The residents here live a simple and fulfilling life. They love nature and advocate peace. What is different from other places is that people here often wear strange big hats, shaped like cute mushrooms, which give people a friendly feeling. This hat is not only their characteristic decoration, but also the Cassian people's expression of respect for nature. Now Cassia Island will become the first landing point of the Tren Adventure Group in the New World. There is a small town in front of you. Why is the island here so quiet? Tren, who got off the Black Pearl, frowned when he saw this strange scene. You know, the place where the Black Pearl docked was not a remote spot like other pirates, but directly docked at the nearest harbor to the island town. "Captain, how about we go take a look?" After saying this, among the three generals of Bikini Castle, SpongeBob and Patrick jumped off the boat together. As for Squidward, he elegantly used his powers to create a staircase. Because Tren didn't plan to stay on Cassia Island for a long time, there was no need for everyone to disembark, so this time the three generals from Bikini Castle followed Tron in. The other group members will stay on the boat, but of course they may also go for a walk by themselves. Okay. Looking at the three generals of Bikini Castle, Tren didn't refuse. Anyway, he just went to the town to have a look and buy some specialties. After all, after the White Bear, everyone became more concerned about food. So after bidding farewell to the other members, Tron took the three generals of Bikini Castle and walked to the town. Cassia Island, Zihua Town. This town completely embodies the unique style of Cassia Island, a quasi-natural style. The buildings and streets throughout the town are integrated with the surrounding environment, as if growing out of nature. There are no high-rise buildings here, only small but exquisite houses, which are surrounded by flowers and vines, making people feel like they are in nature. Most of the shops in the town are named after plants and medicinal materials, which reflects the locals' love and dependence on nature. There are also many small stalls selling a variety of herbs, flowers and plant products, such as perfumes, essential oils, etc. But the most popular product in Zihua Town is Cassia Island's unique cooking spices. This spice not only adds flavor to food, but also has special medicinal value. Looking at the information about Zihua Town provided by Xiaohe, Tren was even more confused. According to this, it shouldn't be so quiet here. What a fragrant place. Patrick drooled as he sniffed the fragrance in the air. Busty and empty. SpongeBob sighed as he looked at this town. Captain, the people here are hiding. Fortunately, Brother Squidward was reliable. He looked at the stalls that were too late to close and expressed his opinion. Hiding. Will world government's newspaper be effective so quickly? Hearing Squidward's words, Tren smiled helplessly. But this is New World. Just when the four people in Tren were confused, several children wearing small hats ran out and shouted at the backs of the three generals of Bikini Castle. It's Marine here. Save us. Hearing the shouts of the children, the four of them turned their heads. Marine. However, when these children saw the appearance of Tren and others, they realized that they had identified the wrong person. Especially the white cloaks worn by the three generals of Bikini Castle. The children opened their mouths in surprise. Just when Tren and others wanted to explain, these children suddenly turned around and prepared to run away again. Faced with this situation, Tren shook his head helplessly and shouted softly, "Stop." But his voice had no effect, and the children were still running as hard as they could. Squidward, on the other hand, sighed, raised his left hand, and instantly a cold breath surged out of his palm. In the blink of an eye, a hard wall of ice appeared in front of the fleeing children, blocking their way. The children's eyes widened in horror, not expecting that this strange octopus man had such magical abilities. Facing the insurmountable obstacle in front of them, they had to stop and stand obediently. "There's no need to run away when you see us." Tren led the three generals of Bikini Castle toward a group of children. "Why don't you leave? You pirates will always only know yourselves." A little boy took a step forward, blocked the other children, and shouted at Tren. "We are not pirates." Tren smiled slightly. "Aren't you pirates?" Looking at Tren's gentle smile, the boy hesitated a little and stared at Tren with a frown. "If so, do you think I would simply stop you just now? It would be more convenient to freeze you into ice cubes." "Then you. We are an adventure group." SpongeBob replied, "This is our leader." "Adventure group, so you are adventurers." So the child's face lit up. "Because today's adventurers only appear in stories, just like the liar King Montblanc Nolando 500 years ago." "That's right," Tren said and took the initiative to squat down, looked at them and asked, "We just ventured to this island and found something wrong with this quiet place. That's why I stopped you out of curiosity and asked the residents of Cassia here." Quote. "Everyone is hiding in order to survive." A little girl was the first to choke and lower her eyes. "Are you hiding?" Looking at this group of Cassia's children, Tren recalled the attitude of the children who thought he was a pirate just now. "Is it because of pirates?" "That's right. It's a pirate," Brother Kid shouted, with hatred flashing in his eyes. "It's because of those pirates who don't keep their word. They won't be harmed if they plant their flag, and they took so many things for free from us. What's the result? Now we are in danger, and what about their promise?" As he spoke, Brother Z tried his best to bite his mouth to prevent himself from crying. "Brother with red hair will come back." The little girl who spoke at the beginning tugged on the boy's clothes and whispered. "Red hair." Hearing this, Tren seemed to understand, so he drew a rough pirate flag on the sand on the ground with his hand. "As the flag you planted before this pattern?" "Yeah." Looking at the pirate flag drawn by Tren, the little girl nodded. "Brother adventurer, do you know the red-haired brother?" Tren did not answer, but stood up. It seems that Cassia Island is one of the red-haired territories. Now the red-haired pirates were severely damaged by Marine in Red Port, so their territory has been invaded by other pirate forces. Chapter 104 The DeKalban Brothers. Advertise here. The strength of the Marines in Red Harbor at that time was no joke. Except for Tren and his gang, any other pirates would answer the question if they came. Sengoku, Garp, and the three generals, these five are not something the red-haired pirates can fight head-on, not to mention that Garp hates the guy who taught Luffy how to be a pirate. So as one of the four emperors, the red hair is different from other pirate forces. Even with Rayleigh's full rescue, it's definitely not something that can be explained by just serious damage. It can only be said that the red-haired Shanks almost gambled his only remaining hand on Red Harbor. Cassia Island's import and export trade of botanical medicines should be very profitable in the New World. Tren touched his chin. After all, the main focus of the red hair pirates is to replace quantity with quality. If the crew is like this, the territory should be similar. Just when Tren was about to ask more questions, two voices came from behind him. "Tisk, it seems that besides that guy, there are others who want to get involved." "There are still people involved, except that guy." As the voice sounded, a group of pirates slowly walked out from behind, exuding the unique temperament of pirates. The two leaders looked like twins, one fatter and the other thinner. The twins wear pirate hats on their heads and cat claw gloves on their hands. The older brother is blind in his left eye and the younger brother is blind in the right eye. The movements and expressions of the two are very similar, but they are also subtly different. What's even more peculiar is that when one of them speaks, the other will immediately repeat what he said in flashback. One of the captains of the Four Emperors Whitebeard pirate group, the DeKalban brothers. Looking at the pirates in front of him, Tren turned around and stood in front of the group of children with a smile on his face. It seems there is no need to ask, someone has already jumped out. The children who were hiding behind the four of them turned around and ran away the moment they saw Tren blocking them. After all, they have to be self-aware at times like this. It seems that Whitebeard doesn't attach so much importance to education for his sons except Moby Dick. Looking at this group of pirate brothers, he chuckled. Dad's territory also needs to be expanded. The territory needs father's sons to expand. The DeKalban brothers said, and at the same time, their fellow pirates behind them all stared at Tren warily. Hey, are you ready to take over the territory as soon as you enter the New World? Tren. Just as Tren and the DeKalban brothers were confronting each other, another guy appeared on the scene. It's still an old acquaintance, the guy who was scared away by Tren's gang in the Sabayati Islands, the captain of the Tree Pirates, Tree Man Runtea. This guy sailed to the New World the same day Tron killed Charles Saint. And he took refuge with another powerful force outside the Four Emperors, who is now the owner of the Pirate Hive Island. Former Rocks Pirates member, Akoku. For a time, three forces converged on Kashia Island, which originally belonged to the red-haired Shanks. The DeKalban brothers rely on the Whitebeard pirates. Treman Renyot is backed by Beehive Island Akoku. Tren is backed by Readers. Kashia Island belongs to Dad. Dad needs Kashia Island. Brother DeKalban looked fierce. When did Whitebeard need more territory? I'm afraid you brothers don't want it for yourself. Renyot waved his hands and directly exposed the thoughts of the DeKalban brothers. Lanyot, your strength can't do anything to our brothers. Would you like to give it a try? In an instant, the two groups of pirates were ready to fight. They didn't care about Tren at all. Because the pirates in New World all believe that Tron's bounty was obtained by killing the celestial dragons. As one of the parties involved, Renyot didn't see the end at all, so he thought that Tren and his group were also escaping behind. He didn't believe that Tren and his gang really dared to attack Marine. At most, they used some tricks and used flying ships to cross the Red Earth continent. Tren looked at the two groups and the large and small bags carried by the pirates behind them, and laughed out loud. Huh. Tren's laughter instantly attracted the attention of the DeKalban brothers and Lanyot. Why are you laughing? I said you didn't snatch it all the way from the east of the island and the other from the west of the island, right? Jenny Tren, our brothers know you, but this is the New World, and you are not qualified to be here. Brothers DeKalban subconsciously thought that Tren wanted to plant a flag on Kashia Island. Standing up, I'm not interested. Tren waved his hand, I'm just curious about something. I heard that after you two brothers were defeated by Fire Fist Ace, you knelt down and recognized Whitebeard as your father. I don't know if it's true. DeKalban brothers 10%. Dad is a trustworthy person. The brothers said harshly with slightly blushing faces. Is Whitebeard trustworthy or is Whitebeard's name useful? Tren mocked. Whitebeard's son also depends on the situation, and they, the pirate captains, are at most part of the force. Arrogant guy, you just want to get in the way after saying so much. Brother DeKalban, fierce at the same time, like two black shadows, quickly rushed towards Tren. Looking at the DeKalban brothers who were attacking him, Tren raised the corners of his mouth slightly with a joking smile on his face, as if he didn't take them seriously at all. Not only did he not have the slightest fear, but he said to himself, it's not a big deal, but seeing this once bustling town become so boring and quiet now makes me lose a lot of the fun of adventure. At this moment, the DeKalban brothers were approaching, their faces showed ferocious looks, and their eyes shone with greed and ferocity. One of them gritted his teeth and shouted, a guy with 3.5 billion is nothing more than this. The other person echoed, I will accept the head of 3.5 billion. However, just when the DeKalban brothers thought they were about to succeed, suddenly an extreme chill hit their faces. In just an instant, the DeKalban brothers and their pirate group were frozen into crystal clear ice sculptures, as if time had frozen at this moment. Boring guy. Squidward let out a cold breath. He just froze their bodies and their faces remained. SpongeBob and Patrick smiled. Not all three of them needed to take action together at all times. Feeling that the body temperature of his body was starting to lose control, Brother DeKalban panicked a little. Jenny Tren, let us go. Kashia Island is yours. Let's retreat. Stay safe, otherwise Whitebeard's side won't let you go. Brothers DeKalban knew that they could only surrender now, hoping to save their lives. Tren shook his head slightly, raised his eyes slightly, making people feel a chill, and said with a half smile, do you think I am afraid of Whitebeard? The faces of the DeKalban brothers changed. Their eyes widened and they looked at Tren in disbelief. What do you mean? Don't forget that this is New World. Dad is the strongest man in the world. We are his sons. He will not let you go. The brothers continued to try to use white words. Beard came to threaten Tren, but Tren remained unmoved. I don't think he will come to me for you. After all, sons are divided into different sizes. Tren said. He didn't have much fear of Whitebeard. He had been traveling through time for several years. This is not animation but reality. In this sea, strength is the most important thing. Moreover, he didn't believe that Whitebeard would go to war because of their two small roles. After all, he is the strongest in the world and he is old. What he wants is the company of his family. Chapter 105 Thorn Fruit, Lanyot. Advertise here. Tron never cared about pirates like the DeKalban brothers who could only fight back and forth with the lieutenant general of his headquarters. You really killed their brothers. Aren't you afraid of Whitebeard? Renyot, who looked at the show with an attitude of watching a show, swallowed when he looked at the Deckard pirates who had all turned into ice sculptures. Swallow. Kill. They did it first, why can't I kill them? Tren looked at Lanyot and said calmly. Suddenly he seemed to think of something and narrowed his eyes. Treant Renyot. You are not a devil fruit user, are you? I am indeed a user with Logia thorn fruit ability. Renyot answered honestly. After all, it is easy to see and there is no need to hide it. Logia. Tren began to look at Renyot. What do you want to do? I'm telling you, if you kill them, you can't kill me again. Renyot quickly raised his hand and said. Originally, he wanted to lift Akoku out, but Renyot didn't even have the dignity of Whitebeard. Yes, why should I give it to Akoku? Thinking of this, Renyot was about to turn around and leave without saying a word. After all, this is what he has been good at since the Sabayati Islands. Seeing that Renyot was about to leave, Tren said directly, Friend Hai, please stay. As soon as these words came out, Renyat suddenly stopped, turned his head, and stared at the 4 people in Tren's group. Are you really not given a way to survive? It's really useful. Looking at Renyat, who stopped with determination to die, Tren couldn't help but be stunned. This sentence is actually the summoning gift given when summoning the white bear this time. So and so, please stay. When you shout this sentence, the person being shouted will turn their head with determination to die. Of course, you may also run away with determination to reach the end of the world. The double probability is 50% respectively. Close black lens bracket. Another dog betting prop. In fact, Tren probably rarely used this kind of prop. After all, it would be troublesome if the opponent made up his mind to run away with this shout. Don't underestimate me, you bastard. Renyat roared angrily, and his hands quickly transformed into thorn-like vines, which were inserted deep into the ground. Immediately afterwards, thick thorns sprouted out of the ground like bamboo shoots after rain, and rushed towards the 4 people of Tren at an alarming speed. These thorns seemed to be alive, moving flexibly between the ground with a fierce momentum. Logia's is just different. Tren dodged it with a backflip, and then jumped all the way back. What a flexible guy. Renyat was secretly surprised by Tren's bug-like dodge ability. At the same time, Squidward and Patrick stood there without hiding, while the thorns near them were either frozen into ice sculptures or burned into ashes and scattered on the ground. The capabilities of these 3 weird guys are somewhat similar to those of the 3 generals. They are worthy of being called pseudo-generals. Looking at this scene, Tren sighed to himself, and he also saw that the strength of the other party should not be underestimated. But he is not afraid now. He fully believes that his strength can defeat his opponent. Therefore, Renyat continued to dance with the thorn strips, preparing to launch a more powerful attack. However, at this moment, SpongeBob had already flashed behind him, raised his leg, and the light shone brightly. Hey, have you ever been kicked by a sponge? SpongeBob said with a sly smile. Nani. Hearing this voice, Telenya couldn't help but be startled. He didn't expect SpongeBob to appear behind him. Before he could react, SpongeBob quickly raised his foot and kicked towards him at an alarming speed. Telenya only felt that his vision had gone dark just now, and, bang, kicked him out at the speed of light. It flew all the way towards the forest, pulling out a long ditch. Ha, ha, Renyat gasped as he stood up slowly, while only half of his head was left, slowly recovering like a thorn. Elemental. SpongeBob stood there, watching the scene calmly, frowning slightly. Garden of Thorns. Renyat, who had recovered, thrust his hands into the ground and let out a roar. Following his movements, countless thick thorns sprouted from the ground like crazy growth and spread rapidly. In the blink of an eye, these thorn strips tightly surrounded SpongeBob. Immediately afterwards, Renyat waved his hand vigorously, and the thorn strips began to shrink rapidly and gradually gathered in the middle. They are like a spherical garden of thorns, trying to trap SpongeBob inside. I am the man called Treman Renyat. Die. However, just when Renyat thought he had a chance to win, suddenly, a dazzling light suddenly shone in the thorn garden that was about to be surrounded. The light was like bunches of sharp arrows, instantly penetrating through the layers of thorns and hitting Renyat directly. Renyat was caught off guard and was beaten back repeatedly, his body swaying like a candle in the wind. Tisk, it seems you also want to eat the delicious crab burger. SpongeBob's voice sounded jokingly, with his hands in a pistol posture and a cunning light shining in his eyes. As soon as he finished speaking, the thorn garden that was about to be surrounded once again shone with light. This time the light was more intense, as dazzling as the sun. The beams of light poured down like dense raindrops, hitting Renyat mercilessly. Can't you stand it even if you are armed? Renyat groaned in pain, his body was shaken from side to side by the beating, and he could hardly stand still. At this moment, he realized that the enemy in front of him was more powerful than he imagined. Captain, do you want to live? Of course. After all, my empty loot storage place hasn't received anything new for a long time. Copy that, SpongeBob replied, and then used the 8-foot mirror to flash behind Renyat. At this time, Renyat could no longer maintain his elemental form and armed color to avoid attacks, and his face showed a look of despair and loneliness. Is my pirate career over like this? He murmured to himself, as if he had foreseen the fate he was about to face. Damn it, I just arrived at New World, obviously everything has just begun, obviously. At this moment, SpongeBob had already flashed in front of Renyat, and his index finger, which was like a pistol, pressed against his forehead. It was originally like this, but the leader needs to live, so. So what? Bang. With a loud noise, Renyat was kicked out at light speed by SpongeBob, who flashed again, and hit the ground heavily. His eyes rolled white, his body kept twitching, and eventually he lost consciousness completely. The tree pirates saw their captain being defeated and fled in all directions. Renyat is not without a trusted partner. Instead, he joined Akoku, and his cadres were all on Beehive Island. This time he only brought some miscellaneous fish. Chapter 106. It turns out that there are more than just pirates on the sea. Advertise here. As the DeKalban brothers and Renyat were eliminated one by one. The Kashia children who were originally hiding also showed surprised expressions. They are so strong. Just like the red-haired man. But the kid brother among them did not say any words of exclamation, but stared at the three of Tren like this, because he was too familiar with this scene. The red-haired pirates were like this at that time. They suddenly appeared and defeated other pirates, and then stayed at Cassia Island to hold a so-called banquet. And in the atmosphere of a banquet, in front of several mayors of Cassia Island, they announced that Cassia Island would be protected by them, and then took away a lot of things, but what? The flag of the red-haired pirates has been thrown away now. Are you the same? Brother Kid stared at Tren and clasped his hands slightly. At this time, Tren was not in the mood to hold a banquet on Cassia Island. His happiest thing now was to drag Renya back to the Black Pearl. Then he took out his thorn fruit and put it beautifully into his trophy point storage point. Patrick, you come and drag that guy. Tren pointed at the fainted Lenyot and said, and then looked at Squidward. Also, it's up to you to take what these two pirate groups robbed. No way, Captain. Brother Squidward looked disgusted, obviously not wanting to move anything. Brother Squidward, let me do it. SpongeBob laughed. Oh, SpongeBob, it's great to have you. Seeing SpongeBob take the initiative to speak, Squidward would not refuse. It's okay, I'll be quick. SpongeBob raised the corners of his mouth, and then a ray of light refracted back and forth on Cassia Island. It would be great if that guy Kizaru is as diligent as you. Looking at SpongeBob, Tren smiled helplessly. Then he was ready to leave, but before leaving, he cast his gaze behind the trees not far away, and happened to meet the kid's perspective. What's your name, adventurer? The kid stared at Tren, especially when he looked at Lenyot. The hatred in his eyes couldn't be hidden. This guy, facing this child with hatred in his eyes from the beginning, Tren didn't know what happened before he came, but Tren knew that, him, was different from, him. I saw the corner of Tren's mouth raised slightly, revealing a faint smile. I'm just a passing adventurer. The name of the adventurer will only appear in the storybook. If you are lucky enough to see it, you will naturally know it. Quote. Then I also want to be a. Brother Kid looked at Tren, his eyes flashing with determination and desire. He was about to shout that sentence, but was suddenly interrupted by Tren. No. Tren looked at the kid seriously and said seriously, Kid, listen to me, go be a Marine. That's where you should go. There is real justice in the Marine. They will teach you how to become strong, but you need to learn to distinguish right from wrong. Quote. Tren knew very well that he was a hanging dog, so he had the capital to roam freely in this sea. But this child is different. He is just a child whose heart is full of hatred at this time. In this way, he will only become a victim of the waves when he sets foot on the sea. Looking at Tren's retreating back, Brother Kid was silent for a moment, then raised his head. It turns out there are more than just pirates in the sea. ... Under the sunset on Cassia Island, 4 figures slowly walked away, including Lenyot, who was dragged by Patrick. Captain, you actually provoked those 2 groups of pirates on purpose, right? Brother Squidward looked at Tren's profile and said calmly. Maybe, Tren said with a smile. Ever since he time traveled, Tren always told himself to learn from his predecessors who had traveled through time. But when he really saw the eyes of those children, forget it, it's just a piece of cake anyway. ... A few days later, New World, Sea Area. On board the whale-shaped Moby Dick, a tall man with a white beard in the shape of a moon arc and a white beard full of needles is sitting on a deck chair. There were many young ladies wearing pink or white nurse uniforms beside him, who were busy giving Bybert infusions and treating wounds. Dad, how are you? Margao looked at Whitebeard with concern and asked. It's okay, he's not dead yet. Whitebeard glanced at Margao, a trace of relief flashed in his eyes, and then he sank again. No news about Ace yet? Whitebeard asked. No, but everyone knows Ace's strength, so it's no problem to catch a teach. Margao said with a smile, and the same man sighed secretly in his heart. Daddy still cares about Shanks. Is this so? Whitebeard breathed a sigh of relief, then turned to look at the other crew members, but I always have a bad feeling. But I still believe in my son. Gu la la la. Quote. Dad. Whitebeard cadres cheered in unison. They were all full of respect and admiration for Whitebeard. At this time, a voice suddenly came. Dad, it's not good. I saw a crew member running over in a hurry, with a panicked expression on his face. What's going on? What happened? Whitebeard asked, frowning. I just received news that the Tren Adventure Group, which had just entered the New World, had a conflict with the DeKalban brothers on Cassia Island. Hearing the words Tren Adventure Group, Whitebeard couldn't help but be startled, then waved his hand. Go on. The crew member hesitated for a moment, then continued. The DeKalban brothers and their pirate group were all killed. What? Whitebeard's eyes widened, a trace of anger flashing in his eyes. Dad, let me go. Let these guys who just came in know whose territory New World is. A tall, muscular man with a broad chest, dark skin, wearing armor, with an angular face and no eyebrows walked out. He is the captain of the 3rd Division of the Whitebeard Pirates, Diamond, Josie. Dad, this group of guys has really made a lot of noise recently. Margao also spoke. At this time, Whitebeard was still there, and Margao was still a young pineapple head. Looking at his 2 sons, Whitebeard said nothing. The 4 emperors all have their own intelligence network, so Whitebeard is very aware of the strength of Tren's group. If I were 40 years younger, I would have directly brought up Kong Yunchi and had a fight with Tren and others. I am almost 72 now. So what's the reason? Whitebeard said slowly, staring at the crew member who reported. It seems like there was a conflict over Cassia Island, the red-haired Shank's territory. Red-haired territory. Haha, I would have forgotten if I didn't mention it. Shanks hasn't returned to the New World yet, and is hiding in a corner to heal his wounds. Whitebeard smiled. Dad, what about the DeKalban brothers? If you lose in the land grab, that's your own business. If you need me to step forward, wouldn't it mean that I'm bullying others? Whitebeard smiled slightly. Among his family members, the only important ones are the officers on the Moby Dick. Chapter 107 Crane's Premonition. Advertise here. Dad. Margao looked at Whitebeard's smiling face and couldn't help but feel a surge of complicated emotions in his heart. He couldn't help but think of the gloomy look on Whitebeard's face in the room not long ago, which happened to be the end of the Battle of Red Harbor, and the time when the Tren Adventure Group entered the New World. Time sometimes makes people feel confused. At this moment, the white beard in Margao's eyes suddenly changed from the world's strongest man with a bold smile and blonde hair to a daddy who needed to lean on a chair and constantly inject drugs. Whitebeard seemed to notice something strange about Margao. His voice was gentle and loving, and he asked with concern, "What's wrong?" Margao. Margao came back to his senses, shook his head slightly, tried his best to smile, and said, "It's nothing, just a little emotional." Whitebeard frowned slightly, with a hint of helplessness and bitterness on his face. He knew that his physical condition was not as good as before, but he still had to pretend as if nothing had happened so as not to worry his children. He patted Margao on the shoulder and comforted. "People will always grow old one day, this is inevitable. But as long as your heart is still young, nothing can stop you from moving forward." Quote. Dad. Margao nodded and was about to answer, but Josie rushed to answer. "You can't let the matter of the DeKalban brothers go like this, Dad. They are also your sons. Although they are not often on Whitebeard's ship, the DeKalban brothers still have familiar cadres, such as Josie." Chowsy. Facing Chowsy's words, Marl scolded him coldly. Margao. Looking at Margao's eyes, Chowsy took the initiative to turn his eyes aside and not look at him. Okay. Looking at his two sons, Whitebeard continued to laugh. "Joes is not wrong, brother DeKalban is also my son. But if my son can't beat me, then I'll have lousy. I can't afford to lose this person. But, at this point, Whitebeard said in a deep tone, send someone to tell Jenny Tren that I don't care what he wants to do, but he'd better not make any plans about the territory that belongs to me." In the eyes of Whitebeard, Tren's involvement in Cassia Island is like a child who just entered the New World and wants to establish himself and occupy the territory. Got it. The crew member who reported the information at the beginning nodded and retreated. "I'm fine on my side, but that guy Akoku won't give up." Whitebeard thought to himself as he looked at the departing crew. And just as Whitebeard thought, Akoku, who was far away on Beehive Island at this time, was simply furious. Originally, he should have been in the position of Akoku in the Four Emperors of the Sea. After all, everyone came from the Rocks Pirates. But Akoku could still stand firm, but he was crushed by the red-haired move, God's Avoidance. But now, the red-haired Shanks is seriously injured, and he finally sees hope of regaining his position. However, what he didn't expect was that just when he was about to take over the red-haired territory, a Tren adventure group suddenly appeared. Jenny Tren. Akoku knocked on the table frantically, but the pirates around him didn't dare to speak at all. "Captain, this guy is difficult to deal with. The Golden Lion died in his hands, and the Battle of Red Harbor." Hearing his subordinate's words, Akoku raised his eyes and said, "Haha, if you didn't tell me, I would have forgotten that Shiki died at the hands of this guy. Just like I was stepped on by the redhead, this guy stepped on Shiki's face." The officer who just spoke stared at Akoku. "Of course we can't make it easy for them." Akoku looked gloomy. "What's the point of killing Shiki? He was definitely strong before, but in his current state, I may not be able to kill him." After speaking, Akoku looked at the two cadres on the left and ordered, "Go and greet him. You must greet him cordially, okay?" The forces under Akoku are still very powerful. In order to defeat him in the original time and space line, in addition to Blackbeard's Black Group, Kirby was also added, and Luo succeeded. During this period, Luo's goal was achieved, Blackbeard gained territory, and Kirby was commended for protecting the citizens during the Rocky Harbor incident and was named the Marine Hero. Don't worry, Captain Akoku. The two cadres who were directed to attack the Tren Adventure Group were of high strength. They were the Lone Wolf Svenno with a bounty of 640 million, and the Lone Wolf Patch with a bounty of 550 million. I also want to see how much water is in the bounty of this group of guys. Svenno, who has a lone wolf tattoo on his left body, sneered. "Hey, Svenno, please don't kill yourself," Patch said in a sad tone. Marine Headquarters, Marineland. The Special Forces Adventure Group clashed with the Whitebeard Pirates and killed the DeKalban brothers. At the same time, the Tree Man Renyot under Akoku's influence was also killed, and there is currently no movement from the Whitebeard Pirates. But Akoku has already sent out the Lone Wolf Svenno and the One-Handed Patch to attack the Tren Adventure Group. A Marine officer read out the information on the document one by one. Is this guy Tron really planning to become the so-called Five Emperors? Hearing this news, Warring States frowned and didn't understand. Warring States, I don't think that's what I'm thinking about now. He, who rushed back to serve as a staff officer, said calmly. We know very well the strength of Tren's gang. If there are more than 6 general-level combatants on a ship, if there is someone who can advise him. And if the distribution is good, they may not be able to contain and start a war with the other 2 Four Emperors groups. It's not that exaggerated. Warring States sweated slightly on his forehead, as if to say, don't be so scary. Ha ha. Looking at Warring States, he chuckled, and then said softly, the red hair is gone, and the white beard is already old. As long as Tren dispatches 3 fake generals, he can completely suppress the Whitebeard pirates and Whitebeard in 1C area. As for the deputy team sword demon Li Jing and Yamagami Dango, they will go to Onigashima to confront Kaido's beast pirates. Both of them are powerful people and are fully capable of competing with the beast pirates. At the same time, the Shadow Wolf King and Tren led other team members to attack Big Mom's territory from all nations. In this way, a 3-sided siege was formed, which can be said to be 3-point flowering. As long as one of the points is breached first, then the rest of the battle will be. At this point, he didn't continue, because the answer was obvious. Hearing his words, Warring States couldn't help but swallowed. He knew that he had always been a very rational and calm person and would not say such words easily. Of course this is unlikely to happen, because none of them will pick peaches for Marine. Then what he means by saying this is. Warring States stared at he closely. For a moment, the scene was so quiet that it was scary. Warring States. He raised his eyes and looked at Warring States. A trace of determination flashed in his eyes, and he slowly said, we must admit a fact. Marine's combat power is no longer able to stabilize New World. Chapter 108. The butterfly's wings began to flutter slightly. Advertise here. You mean recruiting troops? After hearing this, Warring States' face became solemn. He understood that what he said was not alarmist, but a true understanding of the current situation. New World has become an insurmountable mountain due to the existence of Tren's gang and the 4 emperors, and Marine's power seems to be no longer enough to deal with these challenges. He has also thought about this matter in the past few days, but obviously not as much as he. After all, he, a fleet admiral, is responsible for much more than what appears on the surface. Yes and no, what Marine needs is not soldiers but middle-level and high-level combat capabilities. He looked away, like a kind old lady, picking up the slightly cold cup on the table. You mean, to directly convene a world conscription, but like this. The higher-ups will agree. He said bluntly, they know better than you. If Marine is their face outside, then there is no way they will deny this proposal. Because the New World has many world government member countries, if they have to give up, they would rather give up the first half of the Grand Line than give up the New World. Quote. But the position of general. It depends on the situation. If a general-level combat force joins Marine during the recruitment process, we can directly try to expand the number. The era of 3 generals has passed, and now we should change. But if that's the case, shouldn't Gion and Cake, who are candidates for general, be promoted? The 2 of them can only maintain their combat power in the middle range between general and lieutenant general. They are incompetent. He directly stated the 2's combat power. Hearing his evaluation of Gion and Cake like this, Sengoku frowned. He knew that his assessment of people was always accurate, but for Gion and Cake, this was undoubtedly a blow. Gion and Cake are indeed outstanding talents in Marine. They have outstanding performance in their respective fields, but they need more training and growth to become generals. And the superiors will not refuse this proposal. Warring States nodded and agreed with this point of view, because what he said would never be wrong. Since she said that the superiors would not refuse, then the superiors would definitely not refuse. After all, his resourcefulness and experience are there, and her judgments are often correct. Then Porosalino will be responsible for the assessment then. He looked at Sengoku in surprise. Let Kizaru be responsible for the assessment. Do you believe that Guy Palunolino can give you several generals in one afternoon? Everyone in Marine knows Kizaru's character and composition very well. Then let Kuzan and Porosalino swap their jobs, and then call back Garp who ran back to the East China Sea. He and Kuzan will be in charge. Sengoku arranged, and then he sighed deeply. Actually, Zephyr is the most suitable for such a job, but because of his recent state. Thinking of Zephyr's recent situation, Warring States also fell into silence. He will figure it out on his own. He said softly, then changed the subject. One more thing, what do you think? What about the Straw Hats and Alabasta? This matter is not important. Although Alabasta is a member of the world, Smoker, who is a Marine, is also among them. It is easy to arrange, and Crocodile has been imprisoned. The most important thing is, you should know what Blackbeard teaches proposal means. He raised his eyes slightly, and Zhongguo was silent for a while before saying calmly. That insidious guy, Marine won't refuse if he can. Haiyuan calendar 1520, second half of the year. Luffy and his gang ended their boring trip to the Sky Island early and made a big fuss on Judiciary Island. They were now preparing to enter the Sabayati Islands. At the same time, Ace also discovered the last whereabouts of Blackbeard Teach and headed to Banero Island. There is also the world recruitment that was originally supposed to appear in 1521, but it was started early because of a certain butterfly. For a time, Dahai fell into a big wave of Marine recruitment craze. In particular, the sentence in Marines recruitment, as long as you are strong, you can be directly promoted to the general level, attracted countless people. Quote. New World, Scarborough. The Black Pearl stayed next to this unnamed island, while Tren and his gang laid out a large table on the coast. The ninjas and platelets of the Shadow Legion were preparing the decorations needed for tonight's bonfire party. White Bear is mainly preparing barbecue tonight. Do you want to eat anything else? White Bear looked at the members with a smile. The barbecue is already very good. I will go to the island to grab some meat later. Li Jing didn't know when he changed into clothes suitable for barbecue. Haha, I will also come to help tonight. White Bear. Grey Wolf hugged White Bear. Otherwise, given their appetite, you might not be able to roast them. White Bear, you can handle the roast. White Bear was full of confidence. Then let's bake some delicious crab burgers. SpongeBob said with a shovel. Just don't make some evil dishes. Timo, who was sitting on the tree trunk that fell to the ground, looked at SpongeBob and quickly interjected. On the other side, under the sound of Squidward's flute, Sadako and Tuanzi listened quietly to the performance, while Patrick buried himself in the sand, famously imitating a starfish. Tren was not on the island at this time, but at the Black Pearl's loot storage point. At this time, he was holding a pear-shaped fruit with a green curl pattern in his hand, and his eyes flashed with excitement. Here comes another one. Quote. This fruit, the Logia thorn fruit, can turn people into thorn people. Tren carefully placed it into a special glass cover. After doing all this, Tren finally breathed a sigh of relief, with a satisfied smile on his face. Immediately afterwards, they took the lift all the way to the deck. As soon as they got off the ship and were about to walk towards the party, they saw a guy rowing a boat all the way towards the Black Pearl. This is what Whitebeard Daddy gave you. The guy handed the letter to Tren and then rowed away in the boat. However, his main ship should be nearby, and he was just avoiding the Black Pearl before rowing over in a small boat. Looking at the letter in his hand, Tren didn't react for a moment, because it just said, "Don't come to my territory." Originally, this matter could be spoken directly, but due to the special situation now and the sense of oppression from Tren's group, the crew member who delivered the news chose to use paper to express the meaning. Is it because of the DeKalban brothers? Or does he think I came here to seize the land? Oh, forget it, I don't want to think about it that much. Tren looked at the letter in his hand, frowned, and muttered, throwing the letter aside casually. Then he turned around and walked towards the group members who were preparing for the bonfire party. Chapter 109 Akoku again. Advertise here. The next day, everyone who had a short and happy night on Scarobe Island was also doing their own things on this uninhabited desert island. After all, no one can stay on the Black Pearl for a long time. Even though the comfort provided by the Black Pearl is great, one always wants to see something new, especially after seeing the sea for weeks. At this time, Tren was sitting next to a rock, sweating coldly. He first looked at the pile of cards on the ground, and then looked at the 16 cards in his hand. Captain, come on. The cute number 2 and number 4 platelets squatted beside Tren on the left and right, waving their little flags crazily, their eyes full of trust in Tren. Li Jing, who was opposite Tren, was holding 2 cards in one hand. On the left and right sides were SpongeBob SquarePants and Patrick Star with red scarves that said, "Come on their foreheads. At this time, he smoothed his beard with a relaxed look on his face. As a third party, White Bear, at this moment, looked at the succubus tattoo on his chest and fell into a state of hopelessness. White Bear always feels insulted, but White Bear doesn't say anything, and White Bear is very curious as to why the leader would draw such a thing. Commander Tren, give up. You have already lost. Li Jing laughed. Li is sure of the pretty boy's cape you are wearing today and the Peppa Pig on your back. Even Jesus can't keep it. Damn it. Tren looked at the arrogant Li Jing and gritted his teeth, but the cards in his hand were really bad, but as soon as he jumped over, Li Jing's cards were all gone. Oh yo. Seeing Tren's expression, Li Jing's old face pulled, and his whole body instantly leaned forward like a frog, his eyes slightly raised to the side, staring at Tren. I've always wanted to see the leader's expression, this expression of wanting to win but not being able to win. Ha ha ha. Li Jing's expression gradually became abstract. Wait a minute, leader, you don't really want to beat me, do you? You win with 16 cards. Li Jing covered his mouth, and then said softly. If you can kill me with 16 cards, I, Li Jing, will eat this island. Li Jing is really good at talking. Big Wolf, who was tinkering with Platelet's weapons, smacked his lips when he looked at the 4 words, serve the country with loyalty and loyalty, written on Li Jing's back. Haha, Captain Tren can't always win. Timo smiled on the side. Just when Tren was helpless, suddenly a cannonball hit him from a high place. Bang! The strong air wave generated by the explosion directly rolled Squidward lying on the gondola into a mummy. Who is it? Tren reacted in time and dodged. At the same time, 2 Shadow Legion ninjas appeared out of nowhere, each holding platelets number 2 and number 5 in their arms. The platelets turned into beady eyes and blinked, completely unaware of what was happening. Tai. Li Jing stood there blankly, His upper body clothes had been blown away, and the 4 words, loyalty and serving the country, painted by Tren on his back were particularly obvious. He looked down at his perfect hand and trembled as he became Kurozumi. Ah, what a pity. Looking at this scene, Tren suppressed the corner of his mouth and pretended to pity. Originally, I really wanted to kill you with 16 cards, but I didn't expect it, At this time, a group of pirates came from behind the island. One of them was holding an artillery launcher. It was obvious that he had fired the cannonball just now. You guys are so easy to find. Hearing this voice, Tren turned around first and saw the leader of this group of pirates, Svenno, walking out arrogantly. He is covered in wolf skin, with a lone wolf tattoo on his left arm, and a pair of weapons similar to wolf claws on his hands. As that's so, thank you for your hard work. Tren stared at Vince Nuo with a hint of gratitude in his eyes. Seeing Tren's smiling face, Vinceno didn't react for a moment, and said harshly, do you know what you have committed? You dare to seize Captain Akoku's territory, that guy Lenyot woolen cloth. Akoku. Teren was stunned when he heard Vinceno mention Akoku. Be afraid. Captain Akoku is not a big pirate you can fight against. Seeing Tren in a daze, Vinceno laughed arrogantly, and his men also laughed. At the same time, the moment Vinceno appeared, Timo seemed to notice that someone had stepped on his police line. The so-called police line is the thin line Timo placed at high places all around. If there is a sniper on the opposite side, he will definitely choose the location of the police line, because only snipers understand snipers. This is also one of Timo's many scouting methods. Of course, police wires with sensing devices and as thin as hair must have been invented by Big Wolf. After all, they were invented. Big Wolf, I'm going to deal with that guy, here. Timo said as soon as he put on the Omega team hat and prepared to enter the invisible state. Go. I don't think I need to take action here. Grey Wolf looked at Li Jing, who was so angry that his whole body was shaking, and smiled. Okay. After Timo responded, no one knew his location. On the other side, Patch, who is known as the one-handed man among the trees on the mountain island, has a wine bottle on his left side. He is holding a sniper rifle in one hand, aiming at Tren on the coast, and muttering to himself, there is another person today. I'm about to lose my life, why is life always so fragile? There was a hint of frustration in his tone, as if he was full of disappointment and helplessness in the world. However, his expression was slightly sick, as if he was enjoying the pleasure of killing. Yes, why is human life so fragile? At this moment, an unexpected voice suddenly sounded in Patch's ear. This sudden sound frightened Patch for a moment. He opened his eyes wide and looked around, trying to find the source of the sound. But within the scope of his hegemony, he did not feel any killing intent or the presence of other creatures. Who? Patch asked in a low voice, holding the sniper rifle tightly in his hand, ready to deal with possible dangers at any time. Timo was standing next to him but said nothing, just looking at Patch quietly. When Patch looked at Timo, who had not revealed his origin for a long time, his heartbeat could not help but accelerate, and a thin layer of sweat appeared on his forehead. Countless thoughts began to pop up in my heart. For example, where does the sound come from? Is there anyone who can break through the range of his own perception of seeing, hearing, color, and dominance? These thoughts made Patch feel a strong sense of uneasiness in his heart. Something's wrong. Patch was startled, his body tightened involuntarily, and he looked around with vigilant eyes. The steps began to retreat slowly, while remaining alert and observing the movements around them. And Timo, who had been waiting for him invisibly, had a smile on his lips under the mask. In this way, Patch kept retreating, and unknowingly, he stepped on a seemingly ordinary place. Suddenly, there was only a soft, drip, sound, and a pungent poisonous gas burst out from the trap under his feet. What? Patch just reacted, but the trachea in his neck had been cut by Timo with a dagger. Because he tried to speak, blood kept pouring out of the cut wound. The moment Patch fell, he could see clearly, but he only saw Timo's feet. It passed in a flash. Just like what you said, life is really fragile. As soon as he finished speaking, Timo inserted a dagger directly into his brain stem. Patch instantly lost consciousness and fell into endless darkness. Oh, let's stick it in the heart next time. At least he will resist. Timo watched as Patch pulled the dagger out of his head. Then he prepared to cut off his ears out of habit, but after thinking about it, he put the dagger away. Chapter 110 Li Jing's sword carving technique. Advertise here. On the other side, Scarobe Island, on the coast. Wensnuo looked at Tren and his group, still continuing to laugh, and seemed to have no intention of stopping. The reason is actually very simple, because he is waiting for Patch to take action and kill a few guys first. After all, although his nickname is Lone Wolf, Vinceno is not stupid enough to really think that he can kill the entire pirate group by himself, especially a powerful team with a high bounty like the Tren Adventure Group. Why isn't this guy Patch taking action? If this continues, I can hardly stop laughing. Vinceno, who was laughing with his mouth open, muttered secretly in his heart. No, does the name Akoku make you so happy? Tren looked at Vinceno, who was still grinning, with a puzzled look on his face, and couldn't help but frown. Ahem, Captain Akoku is not something you can imagine. If I were you, I would surrender now. Vinceno said with a proud look on his face. No, No, no. Hearing Vince Nuo's words, Tren looked at Li Jing, whose mouth was trembling as if Son Goku turned into a Super Saiyan for the first time. Staring at Vinceno with pity on his face, he smacked his lips. If I were you, I should run now. No, running is useless. Forget it, let's find a better location. After all, Scarab's feng shui looks good. Quote. Looking at Tren, Nuo knew that he didn't take him seriously at all, but it didn't matter, he didn't need him to take him seriously, as long as he could just die here. Thinking of this, Nuo didn't intend to wait for Patch to take action. With a fierce look in his eyes, the wolf claw-like weapons in his hands were instantly covered with armed colors. The bounty is 3.5 billion, then I want to see if you are worthy of it. After saying this, Vince Nuo's movements were really like a wolf, jumping forward left and right, getting close behind him, grabbing with both claws. Tear. Bump. A sword that reflected the sun's rays resisted Vince Nuo's claws, and the owner of the sword was none other than Li Jing, who looked indifferent. The deputy leader of the Tren adventure group. Looking at the person who stopped him, Vince Nuo's face became very ugly, and then seeing Li Jing's expression that looked like a ghost at this moment, Vince Nuo felt timid for a moment, but still gritted his teeth and said, Sword Demon Li Jing. Li Jing looked at Vince Nuo and asked, were you the one who shot the shell just now? Do you know what you destroyed? Listening to Li Jing's words and this guy's expression of wanting to eat people, Vince Nuo raised his eyebrows and thought to himself. Did I just kill a cadre with that cannon? The more he thought about it, the more he felt that he was right. Vince Nuo smiled arrogantly and said, of course. What? Did I destroy something important of yours? Ha ha. It's really you. Li Jing's pupils trembled slightly, and then the strength in his hand increased. Feeling this huge force, Vince Nuo's veins popped up on his face, and he involuntarily began to grit his teeth and persist. His feet even began to sink slightly into the cracked ground, as if they were about to be pressed into the ground. No way. How can this guy be so strong? Vince Nuo was secretly shocked. He didn't expect that the opponent's power was so terrifying. At this moment, Li Jing's voice suddenly came. Hey. Vince Nuo was startled. He looked up and saw that the long sword in Li Jing's hand had been drawn out, and then, a sword light struck out like lightning. Vince Nuo's eyes widened and he had no time to react. He only felt his eyes blurred. The next moment, a sharp pain hit him, and he couldn't help but scream. PFF'd, ah. Blood splashed and dyed the surrounding air red, and Vince Nuo's body was also knocked away by the sword energy. This sword is for 4-2. This sword is for 4 aces. This sword is for the great and small kings. Li Jing struck 3 swords in a row, and Vince Nuo didn't even experience the pain of the first time when he struck with the second sword. Do you know how I feel after playing all morning to get out of this game? Do you know what it means to be close to success? And, Li Jing turned his wrist, this Peppa Pig, which was originally supposed to be tattooed on Captain Tren, will be engraved on your body now. So the person you lost was called Peppa Pig. Then I'm not at a loss either. Vincenyo's pupils turned white and he shouted, and then his whole body shook in the air under Li Jing's sword energy. For a moment, Vincenyo completely lost his life and fell heavily to the ground. On his chest, a bloody Peppa Pig pattern was particularly conspicuous. Li Jing, on the other hand, put his sword into its sheath, looked calm, looked at Vince Nuo's body and said softly. Your whole family is Peppa Pig. After everything was over, Li Jing looked at Tren again, as if to say, Captain, this should have been left to you. Tren. Damn it, if it feels so good to win next time, I'll just stop playing. Captain Vincenyo is dead. Looking at Vincenyo's body, none of the remaining miscellaneous fish pirates were frightened. How is this possible? What Captain Vincenyo said is that he is also a great pirate with a bounty of 600 million belly. Even though the opponent is worth 2 billion, how could he not be able to fight back at all? The other pirates were stunned at the same time. No, do you want to listen to what you are saying? It's okay, we still have Captain Patch. One-handed Patch is one of the supernovas who became famous in the sea 5 years ago. He doesn't. The one Li Jing killed only had 600 million. Why is he lower than me? At this time, a voice came from behind the pirates, and little Timo walked out with his big head, and pulled Patch's head flick. So the fight is over. Captain Patch. Looking at Timo's head thrown out, the pirates finally lost their composure and ran away like crazy. It's just that how can they, the bastards, outrun the ninjas of the Shadow Legion? I saw an equal number of Shadow Legion ninjas emerge from the ground one after another, holding up their swords and taking them all away. And who would have thought that they, who had never hit Uncle Long with darts before, would have a 100% hit rate here? After everything was dealt with, Tren looked at the corpses and remembered Vincenyo's arrogant expression at the beginning, so he smiled. I think I know where we're going next. All the members were stunned. Beehive Island, look at this former member of the Rocks Pirates, Akoku. That night, the Black Pearl slowly sailed away from Scarab, and a certain guy who was wrapped in a hammock like a mummy slowly woke up. SpongeBob, what's for dinner tonight? Squidward stretched and yawned, slowly climbed up from the hammock, and rubbed his sleepy eyes. Then he took a closer look and found that the Black Pearl had already sailed far away. His face suddenly changed and he shouted in panic. No, I haven't boarded the boat yet. Wait, Wait, I haven't boarded the boat yet. Chapter 111. The incident happened. Advertise here. New World, Beehive Island. It's very lively here, and a grand banquet is being held. Akoku and his newly acquired pirate group were partying together, and the atmosphere was warm and cheerful. With the addition of this pirate group, Akoku already has 35 pirate groups, with a total number of up to 4,000 people. At this moment, at the banquet table, many cadres congratulated Akoku. Captain Akoku, you are now a veritable four emperors. What does the red-haired Shanks matter? They were full of admiration for Akoku, and shouted in unison, "Four emperors, Captain Akoku." Now, the red-haired pirates have suffered heavy losses from marine and their strength has been greatly reduced. They are hiding in the front half of the Grand Line to recuperate. Akoku took the opportunity to rise and not only successfully took over most of the territory of the red-haired pirates, but also successfully expanded his sphere of influence to all areas except Kashi Island. After adding his own original territory, Akoku felt extremely proud and confident at this time. He felt that he had finally become one of the overlords of this sea. Who are Shanks? He wasn't even born when Laozi went to sea. Akoku said with disdain as he sat in the front seat, holding a scantily clad beauty in his arms with his left hand, and holding a huge wine glass in his right hand. Akoku's figure is very tall, almost 8 meters tall, like a hill. Back then, that guy Roger had to get out of my way when he saw me. But Shanks was just a kid on his boat. Ha 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 ha. Akoku threw his head back and laughed. Now, on his own territory, facing many newly recruited younger brothers, he certainly wanted to brag about himself to show his majesty. At this moment, a crew member suddenly ran in from outside and shouted in a panic, "It's not good. Captain Akoku, Vinceno and Patch, they are dead." Upon hearing the news, Akoku's face instantly darkened. What did you say? Akoku glared at the crew member with wide eyes. And the Tron adventure group is now heading towards our Beehive Island. The crew member replied in horror. Want to start a war? Does he think Akoku, I'm afraid of him. Akoku stood up suddenly and slammed the wine glass in his hand to the ground, causing the drink to splash everywhere. Vince Snow. That's the big pirate with a bounty of 600 million Baileys, the lone wolf Vince Snow. And Patch, the one-handed supernova who became famous in the first half of the Grand Line 5 years ago. How could they be dead? The words of this crew member made everyone at the banquet look surprised. You must know that most of them have a bounty of only 100 million or 200 million. As for Vinceno and Patch, they are definitely at the cadre level. Bang! Akoku, who suddenly sat on the throne, picked up a weapon similar to a long slashing sword. With a direct slash, the crew member was swept out of the banquet hall, and the whole person fell backwards and rushed outside. Jenny Tren. Akoku retracted his weapon and stood up slowly. His huge body made other pirate captains at the banquet swallow their saliva. A lucky man in the new era. Who is he? I, Akoku, am a great pirate who is famous all over the world. Akoku's eyes were filled with anger. Do you think you are invincible just because you killed Shiki and fought a wave of marine? Captain, we need to know how many of them are here. A cadre took the initiative to stand up. How many people? Ha ha. Akoku sneered, that group of guys is just me. Young people are like this. Without a little lesson, they will think that they are invincible. As he spoke, Akoku swept his eyes over everyone present and shouted loudly roared. You are all my subordinates, listen to me. As long as someone dares to invade our territory, we will make him pay the price. You all go to Rocky Port to set up defenses. I want to see if Jenny Tren can hit me in front of Akoku. Roger that, Captain Akoku. As Akoku's words fell, a burst of cheers suddenly sounded in the entire hall. Long live Captain Akoku. Kill those guys who don't know the heights of heaven and earth. The news that the Tren Adventure Group was about to fight against the Akoku pirates spread throughout the New World. One is a representative of the old era, and the other is a symbol of the new era. In particular, Akoku is different from the Golden Lion. The Golden Lion has been hiding in the East China Sea since the Impel Down incident, so no one knows what the Golden Lion's true strength was at that time. But Akoku is different. He is also a member of the Rocks Pirates, and he has already started his career on the New World Hive Island when the Rocks Pirates disbanded. Therefore, it is a powerful force that is definitely inferior to the Four Emperors. Especially recently, Akoku has joined the red-haired territory one after another, and has steadily reached the position of the Four Emperors. The Great Line, the Windless Zone, a desert island. The red-haired Shank's upper body was wrapped with a bandage. It was obvious that the main injury was burns. At this time, he quietly looked at the gently undulating waves. Captain, we just got the news that almost all of our territory has been occupied by Akoku. Ben Beckman, who also had a bandage on his left arm, looked at Shanks and took a drag of his cigarette. I will get these back when we go back, he said with clear murderous intent in his eyes. No need to fight. At this time, Rayleigh, who was covered in tendons, swam out of the sea, took the towel from Lokiru's hand, sat down next to Shanks, and wiped his hair. What I mean is that there is no need to fight. Shanks looked at his former vice captain and frowned. Because Akoku and the Tren Adventure Group ran into each other. Tren's group is heading to Beehive Island now. Tren Adventure Group, it's them again. Jesus be you, who was still lying on the hospital bed because he took a hard punch from Garp, shouted. If it weren't for this group of lunatics, we wouldn't be surrounded by Marines. They obviously started the war, why are we the ones getting beaten? Damn it. Jesus Cloth. Looking at Jesus Cloth who kept complaining, Shanks snorted coldly, and then turned to Rayleigh. What happened in New World while we were recovering here? When facing Shanks, Rayleigh recounted the information he had obtained directly from Shaki. So Cassia Island is the only island that has not been taken away by Akoku because of Tren. It was the residents of Cassia Island who took the initiative to plant the flag of the Tren Adventure Group. Rayleigh smiled. Even though Tren's group has no intention of seizing territory, the residents of Cassia Island still regard themselves as an island protected by the Tren Adventure Group. The most important thing is that Whitebeard, Kaido, and Bigmom have all acknowledged this matter, so Cassia Island is now the territory of the Tren Adventure Group in name only. Chapter 112 Cacaos. Advertise here. That's true. After all, sometimes you can refuse something without just saying no. Looking at Rayleigh, Shanks also raised the corner of his mouth. But the emotion in his eyes still betrayed him. After all, Shanks, the red-haired man, was not a good-tempered person. The Tren Adventure Group is more terrifying than the Rocks pirate group back then. Moreover, Jenny Tren is not Rocks, and his team members are not that group of pirates with their own agendas. I know, Senior Rayleigh, Shanks said softly. The intern kid back then is different now. After hearing the word, Senior, Rayleigh looked at Shanks, pursed his lips, and stopped talking. Now Shanks is not an intern of the Roger Pirates, but the captain of the famous Red Hair Pirates. Back to the New World, if you want to sail to the Beehive Island where Akoku is located, you need to pass through several other small islands. These small islands can be a good buffer for people who are preparing to enter the Beehive Island, or for those who want to enter the Beehive Island. If a large-scale marine comes, the news will be known as soon as possible. In addition, the location of these small islands makes them look like connected harbors, so many people live here. Therefore, these island chains are called Rocky Harbor. Therefore, with a protective island chain like Rocky Harbor, it can be said that Beehive Island is a natural base camp. This is also the reason why Blackbeard chose this island. At this time, on the deck of the Black Pearl, Tren frowned as he looked at the rocky port, not far away. I thought Beehive Island was just a simple island. I didn't expect it would be so troublesome to sail there. Captain, Akoku seems to have sent many pirate groups to stop us. Timo shouted while looking at 5 pirate ships with different flags from the observation deck. 5 ships. Tren turned to look at the members on the deck and asked, which one of you is coming? Captain, me. SpongeBob, the optimist, is always the most positive one. Looking at SpongeBob's shaking hand, Tron was just about to click on him, but he didn't expect that Patrick was already standing on the bow. They must have never eaten SpongeBob's delicious crab burger, so let me treat them to some. After saying that, Patrick's hands turned into lava. No, don't put it on the bow of the ship. Looking at Patrick's hands, Terran immediately grabbed Squidward and threw him over. Squidward. At this time, Pi Daxing had already raised his hand to the sky and launched wildly. After a while, countless crabs in the form of lava fell from the sky. Patrick's food rain. Faced with such a natural disaster-level attack, the 5 pirate ships were sunk without even having a chance to show their faces. When Pi Daxing looked at this scene, he was stunned for a while, and then suddenly realized. What? Did I kill them? I obviously just wanted to treat them to something to eat. After saying that, Patrick put his lava hand in his mouth, which was like eating ice cream, especially since Patrick's hands were pointy. Captain, you can speak directly next time. Squidward, who had frozen many parts of the bow of the ship with lava, stared at Terran with a look of complaint. I didn't expect Patrick to be at the bow. Tren scratched his head. At this time, the captains of other pirate groups in Rocky Port who were preparing to intercept the Tren Adventure Group looked at the 5 fleeting pirate ships and fell into deep thought. Captain Akoku means for me too. Let's intercept this. And I read it right. That move is obviously Admiral Akainu's meteor volcano. As pirates in the New World, they have all met Akainu at one time or another. I can't fight, I want to leave. There were 3 captains of the pirate group whose bounty was less than 200 million. They turned pale and were about to escape to their ships. Their crew members also looked frightened and followed their captain to prepare to escape. However, at this moment, a clear voice sounded. Bang! The heads of the 3 captains who were preparing to escape suddenly flew out. His body fell to the ground instantly, blood spurting out from his neck. Captain. The pirates were stunned for a moment. They looked at the body of their captain and had no idea what had happened. And the wind blade that cut off the pirate captain's head slowly floated backwards into the hands of a man. Captain Akoku doesn't need betrayers under his banner, right? A voice came, and then, a man wearing gorgeous clothes, with long hair and thin eyebrows appeared in front of everyone. This man was sitting in midair out of thin air. Although he was dressed very elegantly and noble, his face looked hard to describe. Cacaos, leader of the Akoku pirates, Paramesha, user of the wind fruit, can control the wind and make it take on any form. Akoku pirates, captain of the 3rd division, with a bounty of 980 million. Wind Blade Cacaos. Looking at the guy who killed his captain, the other crew members were shocked for a moment. Live. It's so ungraceful. Looking at the 3 corpses in front of him, Cacaos frowned with an expression of disgust. But, you guys really can't stop them. Cacaos looked at the people in front of him indifferently, with a look of disdain on his face. I saw him slowly raising his slender fingers and bending them slightly, as if forming a crescent moon. As he moved, a powerful wind began to focus. Wind Blade Moon Slash. As soon as he finished speaking, an extremely huge crescent-shaped wind blade suddenly appeared in the air and rushed towards the Black Pearl at an astonishing speed. The wind blade is so powerful that it seems to be enough to cut the entire ship in half. What are you going to do this time? A bunch of inelegant guys. Cacaos muttered to himself, his smile making him look even uglier. However, just when the wind blade was about to hit the Black Pearl, something surprising happened. The wind blade disappeared without a trace, without any warning, not even a ripple was produced. Cacaos originally expected that some cadre or swordsman in the Tren adventure group would jump out and resist the blow with all his strength, but the reality surprised him. Haha, he felt the wind blade he controlled suddenly disappear. Cacaos's pupils were shaking. Is he an esper with other protective abilities? Big Wolf, you are embarrassing me. On the Black Pearl, Li Jing, who had even put his hand on the hilt of his sword, looked at Big Wolf, who was standing on the side of the deck, holding the weather cube with one hand, and showed a small expression of complaint. Haha. Big Wolf chuckled, then held the slightly thrown weather cube in his hand, and looked directly towards the pirate ship where Cacaos was, with a trace of curiosity on his face. I didn't expect that there would be a person with the ability to control the wind on the opposite side. So I am very curious about what he would do in front of me in this form. Chapter 113 Showdown. Advertise here. At Rocky Port, all pirate groups under the Akoku pirate group have arrived at the port, but due to the sinking of 5 ships that just occurred, they did not dare to approach the Black Pearl easily. These pirates chose to stay quietly in Rocky Port and remain vigilant. The Akoku pirates have a large number of people, nearly 4,000, almost filling all the entrances and exits of Rocky Port. Everyone holds weapons and stands ready, as if they are ready to fight at any time. The atmosphere in the port was suffocating, and the waves crashed against the pier, making bursts of sound. The sea breeze roared by, blowing the pirates' flags and making a hunting sound. The whole scene was full of tension and uneasiness, and a war seemed about to break out. Cacaos, you are still as uncomfortable as ever. Oh, do you want to die? Just when Cacaos was wondering who could block his crescent wind blade, a sturdy man wearing a bear hat slowly walked out of the shadows. There was a look of disdain on his face, as if he didn't care about Cacaos. There is a long scar on the left side of this man's mouth. It looks like it was cut with a sharp instrument and then sutured surgically. It makes people feel a little scared. Cologne, leader of the Akoku pirates, armed and domineering Grandmaster. It's him. Akoku pirates, captain of the first team, giant bone fist with a bounty of 1.12 billion. Cologne. Looking at this guy who was almost the same height as Akoku, the pirates also became excited. Can't you two calm down for a while? It's a big duel now. Just when the pirates were excited, another man came out. He had a bald head, serious dark circles under his eyes, his upper body was exposed, and there were swords on the left and right sides of his waist. Sticko, leader of the Akoku pirates, double sword swordsman. The bounty is 1 billion Baileys. Looking at Sticko standing behind him, the pirate next to him also swallowed. 3 years ago, he killed 2 Marine headquarters lieutenant generals on Trinity Island, the captain of the 2nd Division, the swordsman Sticko. It seems that the captain is really going to kill them all this time. Otherwise, after all, everyone is here. And I heard that Vinceno and Patch were both killed. Haha. At this time, 2 more people came to the left and right. One was wearing a pirate hat and a leather jacket, and he was serious in speech. The other one's mouth seemed to be raised all the time, his movements were exaggerated, and he had 2 pistols on his waist. Mort, leader of the Akoku pirates, user of the Paramesha wave fruit, can make objects he touches turn into waves. Slapu, Akoku pirates leader, gunner. All of a sudden, on Rocky Port, except for the dead Vinceno and Patch, all other members of the Akoku pirates arrived. On the Black Pearl, Tren looked at Akoku's large pirate group in Rocky Port and raised the corner of his mouth. It seems Akoku doesn't want to let us pass. Captain Tren is still afraid of them. Big Grey Wolf smiled evilly. How about I give the leader a wave of swords to open the way to heaven? Li Jing suggested. Meanwhile, everyone on deck was ready. Timo was wearing Omega equipment, and the 3 generals of Bikini Castle changed into their own clothes and sat on the bench with a concave shape. Sadako sat quietly on the side of Tuanzi. Bai Shang was holding a technological axe prepared for him by Grey Wolf, and he was also excited. White Bear, you want to come too? Terran looked at White Bear and felt a little surprised. Hearing Tren's words, White Bear smiled confidently, then did a beautiful trick and said in a gentle tone. When Ice Bear picks up the axe, in Ice Bear's eyes they are just ingredients. White Bear's sense of responsibility ability is triggered, and his almighty cooking skills change into almighty physical skills. So, you have something to play with. I knew that the guy who could come here is not simple. Looking at the sense of responsibility triggered by the white bear, Tren sighed inwardly. Then he turned his attention to the Beehive Island behind Rocky Port and said, "The other side actually wants to fight on land, so we don't have to drive over the Black Pearl." "Captain Tren, what do you mean?" Tren looked directly at Big Big Wolf. "Big Big Wolf, your wind element should be able to send us directly to Beehive Island, right?" "Easy." Faced with Tren's suggestion, Big Big Wolf picked up the weather cube in his hand. The elf representing the wind element in the cube instantly converted all the energy of the cube into the energy of the wind element. "Then let's have a wave and fall from the sky." "No problem, leader." Big Big Wolf compressed the energy in the weather cube and then released it with all its strength. In an instant, everyone in the Tren adventure group soared into the sky. At Rocky Port, the officers of the Akoku pirates frowned slightly as they watched this scene. "Asshole, we can't let them pass so easily." Cologne shouted to the sky, then lifted up the boulder and threw it into the sky. Stikio also drew out his two swords, followed the thrown boulder and soared into the sky, his weapon color wrapped around him, and then he made a cross gesture. "Leave us here. Cross cut. Then don't regret it." Li Jing drew out his sword and struck Stikio directly, and then the two of them fell back to the ground heavily, setting off a burst of smoke and dust. "Captain, leave this to us." Big Big Wolf used the weather cube to release an identical wind blade and headed towards Cacaw's roar. At the same time, Tuanzi directly grew in size in the air, entered the form of a mountain god, fell heavily onto the battlefield, and opened his mouth to spit out a blast of ice breath that swept out. Sadako also launched a killing curse on Dango's back. Dango, who is like a giant beast, is particularly easy to arouse fear, and this just matches Sadako's ability, so when they are combined, the effect is doubled. "Don't be too presumptuous, guys from the Tren adventure group. The ground is wavy." Mort slapped his palm on the ground and was about to activate his fruit ability, but ended up with a flash kick. "Mort. Damn it." Seeing Mort being kicked away, Silip took out his two guns and fired wildly, but he soon regretted it. Because the level of combat power of the three generals of Bikini Castle can no longer be described as terrifying in a crowd. In addition, Timo and White Bear also work very well together. The two of them cooperate with each other, guard each other's backs, sometimes far and sometimes close, and in an instant they are like battlefield machines harvesting wildly. Just when Rocky Port was in a state of chaos, above the Beehive Island, Tren was facing the strong wind pressure and stared at the tall man. Wei Wei took out the gambling from his waist, and raised the corners of his mouth slightly. "I found you." At the same time, Akoku also felt a coercion descending from the sky at this time, and the momentum was not inferior to his own Captain Rock's. This momentum instantly suppressed Akoku so much that he was unable to move. All the buildings around him were shattered under this pressure. Is it conquerors? How could it be so powerful? Akoku gritted his teeth, raised his head with difficulty, and looked at the sky, only to see a figure falling from the sky like a meteor, rushing straight towards him. "It turns out it's you." Akoku was shocked and immediately clenched the weapon in his hand. At the same time, he also displayed his Conqueror's Haki and used the Conqueror skill to prepare for the opponent's attack. And Teren looked at Akoku, gambling delusion, exuding an aura, which meant that a certain gambling dog had entered the soul. Tren roared and drew out his knife, holding the handle of the knife tightly with both hands, and slashed directly towards Akoku. Akoku's weapon was attached with a tyrant, and he also grasped the long handle with both hands and slashed towards the sky. "Come and give it a try, new age kid." There was an extremely fierce fight, with black and red lightning flashing like a storm. In an instant, all the nearby buildings centered on the two of them were instantly bulldozed. Chapter 114 True and False. Advertise here. The powerful air pressure collided, and Akoku felt an overwhelming force surge in. He tried his best to resist it, but to no avail. In the end, he had to raise his hand and provoke the weapons of the two parties to collide, in order to buy himself some space and time to distance himself. "There's really something there, kid." Akoku finally managed to stabilize his figure, his eyes locked tightly on Tren, with vigilance and shock in his eyes. "It's not easy to come to you." The corners of Tren's mouth raised slightly, revealing a proud smile. Akoku looked at Teren and was a little confused for a moment, because when this guy fell from the sky just now, the terrifying aura he had suddenly disappeared. "Where was your momentum just now?" Akoku stared at Tren and asked. "The knife has been pulled out, and you still want momentum." Tren sneered, but compared to Akoku, who was about 8 meters tall, his body of over 1.9 meters was completely like a child that was too small to be small. "Are you looking down on me? Bastard." Akoku once again grasped the long handle with both hands, and slashed away with the long handle attached to it. "I'm just curious about what kind of weapon this gambling dog like me will use to penetrate the soul this time." Seeing this, Teren jumped back to easily avoid it, and then put gambling delusion on his chest. Suddenly, due to a certain Zanpakuto's complete understanding, Tren's appearance began to change just like the previous 2 times. 2 black lines appeared under Tren's eyes, and a strange pattern disappeared in the blink of an eye. I saw Tren, the corner of his mouth raised slightly, and breathed out. The tranquility of the clear sound, the space without any violation, all this, forget it. Tweet. Clean up the insects. When the words fell, the blade of the sword changed. Gambling. Yama cricket. At the same time, an extremely powerful spiritual pressure began to spread to the surroundings with Akoku as the center, and the space where it passed made a buzzing sound, as if countless insects were chirping. What is this? This kind of mental attack method made Akoku frown, and then his eyes became more fierce. I saw Akoku's body as huge as a hill coming straight towards Tren like a cannonball. After leaping high, he slashed down with the long-handled giant axe in his hand with unparalleled momentum. Shen Bai. It's really different. It's really exciting to fight against a strong man with pure physical skills. Seeing Akoku rushing towards him without fear despite the sound waves, a hint of excitement flashed in Tren's eyes. He held the sword in both hands and held it across his chest, preparing for Akoku's attack. Bang! With a loud noise, Akoku's long-handled axe collided with Tren's long knife, causing a burst of sparks. Why does it seem like your boy's strength is only this much? Akoku, who was holding down the long axe, stared at Tren at close range with a grin on his face. Really? Are you happy then? What do you mean by this? Why are you unhappy? What do you think? Tren also chuckled, and then the silver circle next to the handle of the knife became abnormal. A sense of disconnection. As soon as he finished speaking, Akoku staggered suddenly because Tren, who had just fought with him, suddenly disappeared. Looking at Tren who seemed to have disappeared, Akoku did not look around, but immediately used the weapon to cut a circle around him. The powerful air waves dispersed crazily in all directions, as if they could not avoid it as long as Tren was by his side. Disappeared completely. You can't even feel anything. Akoku stopped moving, looked at the quiet surroundings for a while, and frowned. Or did you run away? Just when Akoku thought that Tren had really escaped, the scene suddenly turned back to reality. It was still the same scene just now, but at this time Akoku stood there blankly, motionless. It turns out that everything he did from the beginning was just his imagination, because this place was not a hive island from beginning to end, but a huge black curtain. Zanpakudo Kiyomizu's swastika. Kiyomizu final style. Enma cricket is an ability that can form an oval-shaped black barrier in different directions. As long as the enemy is within this barriers, they will be ruthlessly deprived of their senses such as spirit, knowledge, sight, hearing, smell, etc., but they will only retain their perception. And gamble. Yama cricket belongs to Tren's complete understanding power. Therefore, at the moment when Tren drew the knife in the air, everything that happened was actually a false scene. This is why Tren's momentum is as destructive as Conqueror's. Why did Akoku feel that he was almost unable to stand upright under the pressure of Tren's momentum? You must know that gambling dog's momentum cannot have abilities other than momentum, so from the moment he drew his sword, Akoku was entered into Tren's false world, and the reality in his fantasy was all given by Tren. This ability is really terrifying. Tren looked at the gambling delusion, Yama cricket, in his hand calmly, and then stabbed Akoku directly. Akoku, who was standing there, was about to cut his neck with the blade. Suddenly, he was fully armed and blocked it, but his neck still got a small scratch. The reaction is really fast. Akoku. Looking at Akoku who woke up, Tren looked stunned. Is this little trick useful? Do you think I don't know the function of your sounds? Akoku looked at the black scene around him and sneered, while blood flowed from his ears. Use your own ability to forcefully burst your eardrums, so that the false senses I gave you will become ineffective because the true sense is shattered. I want to see what other tricks you can do this time. Akoku shouted, and the long-handled axe in his hand struck hard towards Tren with strong wind. The former Rocks Pirates guy, he's just not that simple. Tren's eyes narrowed, he held the big sword tightly with both hands, swung it upwards, and firmly blocked Akoku's attack. For a moment, the axe and sword collided, making a crisp impact sound, and sparks flying everywhere. You don't have to hide this time. Akoku suddenly gave up his weapon, drew out his left hand with a weapon attached, and punched Tren. Really? Tren gave up resistance immediately. You think you were deceived because you heard it, so what you saw must be true. The silver circle next to the knife handle is abnormal. The moment he heard Tren's words, Akoku's pupils suddenly shook because he heard it. Impossible. Akoku subconsciously touched his neck and found that the original blood stains had completely disappeared. It's fake. How could it be fake? After saying that, Akoku slapped his ears hard with both hands. The powerful pain made him grit his teeth for a moment. Sorry. It seems to be true this time. Tren looked at Akoku who did not punch himself, but instead cut his ears, and laughed. Chapter 115 False World. Advertise here. At this time, Akoku, who could not hear the sound, looked at Tren, who was laughing, and a sense of shame at being teased filled his heart. Akoku burst out his conquerors, instantly covering the entire space, and the powerful pressure made the surrounding air thicken. Immediately afterwards, his figure quickly teleported to Tren like lightning. Jenny Tren. Akoku roared, his voice full of anger and unwillingness. Virtual blade. The corner of Tren's mouth raised slightly, revealing a contemptuous smile. As soon as the knife in his hand was turned, countless sharp-edged remnants flew out like phantoms, shooting towards Akoku with a fierce momentum. Bang! Bump! 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 Akoku waved the weapon in his hand and turned it at an extremely fast speed, blocking all the sharp blade afterimages. Every collision produced a deafening sound and sparks flew everywhere. Immediately afterwards, Akoku suddenly slashed out, slashing towards Tren with a huge axe. Bang! A powerful wave of air swept in like a storm, destroying both Tren and Shame. For a moment, the scene once again returned to the original appearance of Beehive Island. Akoku breathed a sigh of relief as he looked at the ground and surrounding buildings that were broken due to the initial battle between conquerors. Especially the sunlight made him feel as if he had regained life again, and the feeling of depression shrouded in darkness instantly dissipated. Immediately afterwards, Akoku looked in the direction where Tren flew out, and said coldly, "Small tricks never come to the fore, show your true abilities." At this time, the corner of Tren's suit in the ruins rose slightly, and then on Akoku's side, there was a sudden pain in his side. PFF'd. Then countless stab wounds appeared. Looking at the wounds on his body, Akoku was confused for a moment, when. "Didn't you stand up and scratch it for me?" Tren, who was supposed to be in the ruins, actually appeared behind Akoku and slashed him in the back again. For a time, the huge Akoku was covered in scars, with wounds everywhere on his body. Blood kept flowing out from the wounds, staining his body red. Akoku himself is in an indescribable state. He stared at Tren with wide eyes and a face full of horror, and shouted with a trembling voice, "What kind of ability do you have? Why is this happening? Why? Obviously I have broken this shady story." However, before he could finish his words, he was interrupted rudely by Tren. "There's no way. Didn't I tell you a long time ago that what you see may not be true?" "Ah, impossible, impossible," Akoku yelled crazily, the expression on his face almost distorted. "Because he can hear again. Is this place real or fake? Tell me, Jenny Tren." Akoku shouted loudly, swinging the axe in his hand again and slashing towards Tren. Tren, who was knocked away, did not resist, but showed a proud smile, and left a faint sentence, "Can't you tell whether it is true or false with your eyes?" Eyes, that's right. As long as you can't see, you can't affect me at all." Listening to the words echoing in his ears, Akoku suddenly became serious and directly opened his eyes. A poke. "Ha ha ha, I can't see anything now. Your tricks can't be played on me anymore." Akoku's eyes were like two blood holes, and blood was flowing down his cheeks, but his expression became relaxed, as if he had finally gotten rid of some kind of restraint. "But why are you going to hit me like this?" Tren saw the situation and drew his knife, but Akoku easily used his knowledge to dodge sideways and hit back. Bump. Tren turned around to block, but the strong force still made him retreat. In the face of the powerful sight, it is important to have eyes or not. Akoku's mentality has improved at this time, because he thinks that as long as he can't see it, he will not be affected. "But are you really blind?" Suddenly Tren appeared in Akoku's ear without any warning and sighed slightly. This sentence seemed to be filled with some kind of magic, and Akoku's heart was filled with some kind of different thoughts for a while. For example, try to open his eyes that were blinded by himself. "Impossible. I clearly poked myself blind just now, how could it not be possible?" After saying this, Akoku still subconsciously raised his eyelids. But when he saw Tren squatting in front of him with a smile on his face, the shady surroundings, and himself intact, his mentality exploded. "True. False. False. True." Akoku muttered to himself. Suddenly he was about to grab the weapon and thrust it directly into his chest. In an instant, the weapon turned into a broken rock. Look. Watching all this, Akoku lowered his head and laughed crazily. "Fake. All of this is fake, I understand. Ha ha ha, all of this is fake, isn't it? Jenny Tren. No, even you are fake." Suddenly the scene changed, and the real Beehive Island appeared. There were no traces of fighting around, and the buildings and ground were still intact. There was only a blind and deaf Akoku, kneeling in front of Tren with a weapon in his hand, and the silver circle next to the handle of the gamble. Enma cricket in Tren's hand no longer shimmered. Tren silently took a step forward and said softly, "Then do you think it is true or false now?" I can't tell. I can't tell the difference. I really can't tell the difference. Am I blind or deaf? Is this Beehive Island or a shady plot? I can't tell the difference." Looking at Akoku, who was almost in a state of madness, Tron put the knife in his hand on his neck without hesitation. However, Akoku shouted without fear, "You can't kill me, because it must be false this time. I know it very well. I have understood it a long time ago." Faced with Akoku's arrogant attitude, Tren just said lightly, "I'm sorry, there will definitely be no lies this time." After saying that, he swung the knife in his hand, and a stream of blood immediately spurted out. In this way, the big man who had ruled the Beehive Island for decades, the former member of the Rocks Pirates and the Great One Piece now, ended his life in the intertwining of illusion and reality. Maybe he won't know the truth until his death. Tren looked at the gambling Yama cricket in his hand, with a trace of complicated emotions in his eyes. He slowly sheathed the knife, as if a long battle had ended. At the same time, the true meaning of this sword was finally revealed to everyone. Explanation. Yama cricket. False world. Following Tren's movements, the surrounding space began to distort and deform, and strange lights flickered. In this false world, everything becomes blurred, and reality and illusion are intertwined. Terran's figure gradually disappeared, replaced by a huge black curtain. It spins and devours everything around it. It replaces your senses with crazy real and fake, making it impossible for you to distinguish everything clearly. As Terran said at the beginning, the complete form of this Zanpakuto. What a terrifying ability. Chapter 116 The Battle of Rocky Port ends. Advertise here. Rocky Port. This place that became famous and prosperous due to its natural island chain is now showing a polarized scene. Behind the port, there are countless prosperous harbor towns located on small islands. However, at this moment, the seaside seems to be in a purgatory on Earth. Countless pirate ships ran aground or sank on the shore, and the once powerful pirate flags were also devoured by blazing fire. The corpses of pirates were lying scattered on the shore, which was horrifying. Whenever the waves surge, several bodies will be picked up and left to drift with the current. It has been almost 50 years. In addition to the Battle of Adwal, between the Golden Lions flying pirates and the Roger pirates, there was also the Battle of the Valley of the Gods, in which several forces participated. Now history has to add another chapter. The Battle of Rocky Port, created by the Tron Adventure Group and the Akoku Pirate Group. Because these battles are undoubtedly huge numbers of characters and lives lost. Dead. Everyone is dead. Cologne, known as the Big Bone Fist, looked at the scene on the harbor shore, his lips trembled slightly and his face was as pale as paper. His eyes were full of fear and despair, as if he was seeing a doomsday scene. Immediately afterwards, the man's eyes turned white, his body lost balance, and he fell heavily to the ground. The huge holes on his chest looked particularly dazzling and frightening. On the other side, the captain of the 2nd Division of the Akoku Pirates, the swordsman Sidioka, was hit by Li Jing's fierce attack, and was torn in half along with half of the port in an instant. The scene was horrific. As for the body of another Kadri Silip, like most of the pirates, it was melted away by Patrick Starr in the fierce battle. The only ones who are still alive are Cacos and Mort in the hands of Big Big Wolf. I saw Big Big Wolf grabbing one with each hand, throwing them aside like a pile of arhats, and clapped his hands. I don't know what's going on with the leader. The leader will definitely be fine. Once Pai Daxing cleans up, we will go pick him up. Li Jing chuckled. Behind the two of them is the Black Pearl that is docked. All the members have returned to the ship, except for Patrick who is still purifying the environment. Beehive Island. It's over. As Tren put Gambling Delusion back into its sheath, his body also relaxed and stretched out. At the beginning, he was full of expectations for this Zanpakuto that could penetrate the soul with one shot, and even thought that it might have powerful combat capabilities. However, when he learned about the true characteristics of Enma Cricket, he discovered that it turned out to be a Zanpakuto that plays with the mechanism. But despite this, Tren still couldn't help but sigh that this knife was terrifying. Thinking of this, Tren sat down on a nearby rock and opened the system interface without hesitation. After all, now he needs to wait for the arrival of the Black Pearl, and this time can be used to check the progress of his mission. Open black lens bracket summon 170% close black lens bracket. 170. Looking at the summoning progress on the system, Tren instantly clicked on the details of spiritual emotions. Garp 10%, Akainu 25%, Decalban Brothers 10%, Akoku 125%. Garp and Akainu are leftovers from last time, and the Decalbane brothers are from before. Akoku delivers a full 125%. Because he was in battle before, Tren didn't notice the system's mental emotion collection prompt at all. That is to say, Akoku provides the highest 25% of spiritual emotions every time, and provides it 5 times in total. And this is all because of the effect of Yama Cricket, so if. Thinking of this, Tren's eyes suddenly lit up, and then when his eyes fell on the gambling on his waist, his face suddenly darkened. Because gambling has returned to its extremely hard and ordinary appearance. Tren's mood fell from excitement to rock bottom in an instant. His expression lost its color, and his whole person became gloomy. He slowly slid down the rock weakly, and his heart was filled with despair. Why should I sheath it so early? I feel like I have missed hundreds of millions. Is there really any need to exist in this life? Just as Tren was drawing circles on the Beehive Island, the spies who had determined the entire battle were sending the news back one after another. Wangguo, Cake Island, today is the 43rd engagement party of 4 Emperor's Big Mom, but I don't know where she caught men of other races. But this engagement party that should have been cheering fell into silence because of the end of the Battle of Rocky Port. The aunt looked at her sullenly, and then her 33rd son, Charlotte Lezen, spoke. You didn't lie to me. Did Akoku really lose? No. Charlotte Razan looked at her mother and swallowed. The Akoku pirates were really destroyed. And Akoku himself was killed by Jenny Tren, and his body is still on Beehive Island. As for the Kadris and pirates under his banner, a total of more than 4,000 people were wiped out in Rocky Port. Quote. What about the Tren Adventure Group? Those guys can't possibly be safe and sound. Auntie continued to ask. They can only be said to be unscathed, or from what I saw, the Akoku pirates and the Tren Adventure Group are not at the same level at all. As soon as these words came out, everyone present was shocked. This was no joke. You must know that destroying a large pirate group second only to the 4 emperors would cost much more. Of course, most of the people who were shocked were the outsiders who came to the engagement party, but the aunt's children were worried about other things. That is the pirate group they deployed near Beehive Island. After all, the snipe and the clam fight, and the fisherman benefits. With so much territory before Akoku, how could other emperor-level forces not be interested? No matter who wins, they will gain a lot of weight. After all, after just fighting a battle, you can't still have the strength to fight a second one. And the result now is, the Tren Adventure Group really has the strength to fight in the second game. Call all those guys back. Suddenly the ant ordered, and then her expression paused, and she changed her words with a smile. No. There is no need to retreat, let those guys get an invitation letter and give it to Jenny. Loon's hand. Tell him that I invite him to my wedding banquet. Yes. P.S. Haha, salted fish appears again. The 8th partner is about to appear. 3 partners participated in the voting. The one with the highest votes will win. 1. Gengar, a duty combatant and night scout, a partner who cooperates with Teemo. He usually likes to stay in Teemo's shadow. 2. Long Tour is a duty maid. I won't introduce the maid's job in detail. She is just a guy who likes to chop off tails for the leader to eat. 3. Steve, one of the job forging groups. I am a cube man, not Captain America. Chapter 117 The Aftermath of Rocky Port. Advertise here. Rocky Port is a busy port on the seaside. Its prosperity is closely related to the many surrounding towns. Although Akoku did not become the 4 emperors, the pirate group under his command was large in size, with a number of nearly 4,000. There is an important reason behind this achievement: the supply of Rocky Port. Rocky Harbor is world-renowned for its penultimate location and rich resources. Not only is the port trade developed here, but food from all over the world is transferred here, as well as all kinds of precious treasures and materials. And these wealth will continuously flow into Akoku's pocket due to crossing the port, allowing him to feed such a large pirate group and maintain their combat effectiveness. This is why Akoku chose Beehive Island as his target without hesitation when the Rocks pirates divided their loot. Akoku is dead. Big One Piece is dead. As the island chain closest to Beehive Island. The news of the defeat of the Akoku pirates swept through the entire Rocky Port like a storm and quickly spread to dozens of nearby towns. The defeat and destruction of the Akoku pirates makes people lament that even a person as powerful as Akoku cannot escape the pirates' final fate. People were shocked, feeling sorry for the fate of this great pirate who once ruled Rocky Port, but more than anything, they were happy. You must know that Akoku from the Rocks pirates has never been a kind guy, but a pure pirate, and you can only imagine what pirates will do in their own territory. Is it over? Haha, I knew this would happen to Akoku. Liberated. Akoku is dead. Long live. The news spread quickly among various towns, causing an uproar. People were buzzing, discussing the details of the battle and the cause of Akoku's death. Some believe that Akoku's greed ultimately led to his demise, while others place the blame on the sheer strength of the Tren Adventure Group. In any case, Akoku's death undoubtedly brought a huge impact to Rocky Port, and people began to think about how the situation would develop next. Especially, how will the Tren Adventure Group face Akoku's territory next? This is also the most worrying issue for civilians in the pirate world. They are worried that Tren's group is like Akoku, and they are also worried that Tren's group is more excessive than Akoku. As for Marine, New World Marine's management and control capabilities are the weakest, and they are not considered by civilians. It's Tren's gang. At this time, people gathered at the harbor saw the Black Pearl, mainly because of the BGM. At this time, on the Black Pearl, Tren, who was picked up on the ship, was still not giving up. He was lowering his head and doing some kind of up and down sword drawing movement frantically, and his hands were swinging extremely obviously. Patrick, SpongeBob looked at this scene, his little mouth opened slightly, and his little hands patted Patrick's shoulder crazily. The leader is playing games by himself again, let's go together. Oh yeah, Patrick nodded, and then the 3 people on the bow moved in unison, and the picture. No, I am drawing my sword. What are you 2 drawing? SpongeBob. He. Patrick. Hey, Captain has fallen into this period again. Li Jing looked at the 3 people on the bow of the boat, sighed slightly, and then took a sip of the brewed pu'er tea. Tisk, De Hongpao drank too much, and I can't taste anything else for a while. Li Jing, just watch first. I'm going to the 3rd floor fruit warehouse to deal with these 2 guys. Big Wolf said, waving to the 2 Shadow Legion ninjas, and then the 2 ninjas dragged Kakao's and Moat up and followed Big Wolf. Go. Li Jing nodded, and then he turned his eyes and saw Tuanzi lying peacefully in a soft spot on the deck. This soft spot was made by Sadako. Danzi likes to stay here when she is not in her room. Especially when the platelets have nothing to do, they will chat around her or play some small games. It would be great if the platelets could give me a squeeze on my shoulders. I'm such an old man. Before Li Jing could finish his words, a look came from behind him. White Bear heard that 3 years. Ahem. What's this? I just want to experience the scene of having children and grandchildren. Looking at the White Bear, Li Jing cleared his throat. White Bear just asked if Chen Liang, who has been there for 3 years, is in the wine warehouse on the 3rd floor. White Bear looked at Li Jing and tilted his head, with the corners of his mouth raised slightly. White Bear, you've learned too much. On the observation deck, Teemo looked at the situation on the shore of Rocky Port, slowly retracted the telescope, and then turned to look at Squidward, who was lying on his small crane, and pursed his lips. No way, Squidward. You don't understand, Teemo. Your place is the only quiet holy place. Squidward said lazily. You can still sleep on such a small bed. Teemo sighed and shook his head. I'm an octopus, Brother Squidward replied, then turned around and stretched. At the same time, people in Rocky Port looked at the Black Pearl driving farther and farther away. They were in a daze for a while, not knowing what was happening. Do Tren and his group really intend to leave directly? A civilian murmured to himself. Nonsense. Isn't it good for them to leave? Another guy said loudly. You know, we are the guys who are called pure evil. His voice was full of ridicule and disdain. But, what should we do next? The people around him began to talk one after another. Some people agreed and felt that the departure of Tren and others was a good thing for them. After all, they were pirates. They have always called themselves an adventure group. They probably don't like occupying territory. What do you say about Cassia Island? Some people are skeptical, thinking that things may not be that simple. Maybe they just left temporarily, maybe they will come back, otherwise what will we do? Someone said worriedly. The civilians of New World are like this. Without the protection of Marine, the territory of a certain pirate is actually not bad. At least they are only being robbed of money by one pirate, instead of being robbed, killed and burned by various pirates in turn. The most important thing is that if someone is in charge, no other pirates will dare to cause trouble in the port. However, no matter how everyone speculates and discusses, the Black Pearl has drifted away and gradually disappeared above the horizon. It seems they really don't want to occupy Rocky Port. Then, what should we do next? Suddenly a civilian shouted, staring at a sea surface. And dozens of pirate ships on the sea are sailing towards Rocky Port. As mentioned at the beginning, there will always be people who dare to taste this incredibly fat piece of meat in Rocky Port. For example, each of the cute beast pirates. Chapter 118 The Ship King. Advertise here. On the sea surface, several huge pirate ships were slowly heading towards Rocky Port. The Black Pearl was heading out in the direction of departure. For a moment, the two sides met in front and behind. Black Pearl. Tren, who was on the bow of the ship, frowned as he looked at the pirate ships with animal-like flags in front of them, especially the elephant-headed pirate ship in the lead. This flag, the beast's pirates. Captain, what do you say? At this time, Timo on the observation deck asked loudly. Because both sides were quite close, and Tren himself was at the bow of the ship, Timo only needed to ask about the next action. They should just be passing by and have little to do with us. Tren didn't think much about it. After all, he had just accepted the loss of his emotional artifact. He just wanted to find a calm place and summon his next partner beautifully. Well, if at this moment, the leader of the beast pirates on the other side is someone else who sees Tren's Black Pearl, and has no tendency to take the initiative to attack, they will definitely choose to retreat but. On the deck of the lead ship of the beast pirates, stood a tall and huge man. He has golden hair, which is tied up like a braid, and two huge tusks are installed on both sides of his shoulders, as if to show his might and strength. Wearing a black fur windbreaker, it rustled with the sea breeze, and the shoulder area was covered with a layer of hard thorn armor. As for his face, it was half covered by a half-iron mask, but from the exposed part, it could be seen that there was a sharp aura in his eyes. Wearing a pair of white horn-like ornaments on her ears, she looks particularly eye-catching. At this moment, he was staring intently at the Black Pearl heading towards their pirate ship, his eyes shining with light. This person is the leader of the 5-ship pirate group this time, one of the 3 major disasters of the beast pirate group, animal type, elephant fruit, ancient species, and mammoth form. The 4 Emperor's Beast signboard, the Ship King, and Drought Jack with a bounty of 1 billion Baileys. Tren Adventure Group. Jack snorted coldly. Because of the iron mask covering his mouth, his voice sounded low. Captain Jack. At this time a pirate came over. What's wrong? Jack lowered his eyes and stared at this pirate who looked very small to him. The captain's order is to seize Rocky Port, but now the Tren Adventure Group's ship seems. The little pirate was about to say something, but was interrupted by Jack. What does it look like? They obviously want to have a head-on collision with me. But their route doesn't look like. At this time, the navigator on the ship looked at the Black Pearl's sailing line and speed. The more he looked at it, the less he wanted to fight, but was prepared to miss their pirate group. What don't you want? They're all coming. Jack shouted, and his companion wanted to get closer, let alone the one coming now. Do you really think that Jack has no temper? As the Black Pearl got closer and closer, the smile on Jack's face became more ferocious, as if he had seen an upcoming victory. Captain Gia, Captain Kaido said to retreat. At this time, the pirate boy wanted to remind him, but was knocked to the ground by Jack's slap. Should I avoid his sharp edge? Jack shouted in a deep voice. Who do you think I am? At the same time, on the side of the Black Pearl, Tren, Li Jing, SpongeBob and Patrick on the forward deck all saw Jack on the mammoth. The pure evil Jenny Tren, the sword ghost Li Jing, and the fake generals Huang Mian and Red Star. I'm not afraid of people that other pirates are afraid of. I'll do it by ships that other pirates don't dare to sail against. Jack's breathing became rapid, and he took out a weapon similar to a short scythe with both hands. Pull the boat closer to me. Following this order, the huge mammoth rushed straight towards the Black Pearl. Captain, he seems to be rushing towards us. Li Jing looked at the mammoth driving faster and faster, and couldn't help but whisper to Tren in a curious voice. He didn't think about this at all, but was curious. Tren, who was standing on the bow of the ship, heard this and looked up again. Damn, what a guy. Jack is so brave, he really relies on having a boat. Forget it, Li Jing, you can handle it. Big Wolf happened to be busy in the fruit warehouse. Tren waved his hand, then turned around and left the bow of the ship. What's the background of this guy? Li Jing said as he drew out his sword. Well, Tren touched his chin, the bounty is more than 1 billion, and a pair of tusks is worth 1 billion, but he seems to be a devil fruit user. You. Before Tren finished speaking, Li Jing had already slashed out with his sword, and a sword energy was like a crescent moon, streaking across the sky, and then hit Jack hard on the body. Suddenly, the entire sea surface was stirred up by the sword energy, forming a huge wave. Quote question mark question mark question mark question mark quote. Jack looked at everything in front of him in horror. He didn't expect that the other party would be so powerful. However, he relies on the ship king. Besides, it's all here, wouldn't it be shameful for Jack to go back? Do you understand the meaning of the big sign? Thinking of this, Jack used his devil fruit ability, mammoth form. In an instant, his body became extremely huge, like a real mammoth. However, this did not let him escape. The sword energy was still unstoppable, and he, the mammoth, and 4 other pirate ships were also affected and cut off in half. The whole scene was so tragic that people couldn't help but be shocked. Rocky Port. When that earth-shattering sword light opened a bottomless ravine on the sea, the entire Rocky Port fell into deathly silence. #+#equals. All the civilians leaning on the harbor widened their eyes and looked at this shocking scene with disbelief. Their mouths were opened wide, but they could not make any sound, as if they were shocked beyond words by the sight in front of them. The harbor, which had originally become noisy due to whether Tren's group would become the new owner, suddenly became extremely quiet, so quiet that it made people feel scared. The sound of the waves seemed to disappear at this moment, and only the sea breeze blew gently, bringing a bit of coolness. On the sea, the sword energy swung by Li Jing was like an invisible force, quickly spreading across a distance of several hundred meters before gradually dissipating. The huge waves stirred up by the sword energy were like angry giant beasts, beating crazily on the shore of Rocky Port. The water they splashed formed beautiful arcs, and then fell heavily to the ground, making a crisp sound. A painter in Rocky Port slowly lowered his gaze, then picked up a pen and instantly drew the flag of the Tren Adventure Group, and then hung it in front of his store. At the same time, more people reacted similarly, and the mayors of several small towns also hung their flags high on the highest points of the towns they governed. At this time, several pirate ships under the flag of the Big Mom pirates that were further away from the Black Pearl slowly stopped in place watching this scene. The leader on the boat, Baron Eggy, silently took out his handkerchief and wiped the sweat from his forehead. No, if I send this invitation, can I still go back alive? Chapter 119 The Eighth Partner. Advertise here. Chapter 119. The powerful dragon, the only daughter of the Chaos Emperor. She has fought and charged against the Supreme God for her ideals. But, is fighting sometimes really what she wants? She doesn't know what she is doing. Now, when she saw her friends calling her in the sunshine and the leader waving to her at the banquet, she finally understood what she was protecting. Appear. Dragon Maid, Thor. A few days later, the Black Pearl was moored quietly on the calm sea next to a small island. On the observation deck at the bow of the ship, Timo was holding a brand new sniper rifle with a satisfied smile on his face. He pointed the muzzle of the gun at the target in the distance, gently pulled the trigger, and felt the vibration and powerful power of the gun. It feels different to be able to update it on time. This sniper rifle was just given to him by Big Wolf. At the same time, on the deck of the Black Pearl, everything seemed so warm. As usual, the ninjas of the Shadow Legion carefully cleaned every inch of the place and kept the ship clean. Hurry up! Hurry up! Suddenly, a group of cute platelets hurried past them, and their anxious look made people laugh. In a corner of the deck, an exquisite wedding banquet invitation was pressed under the cups and plates, which seemed to indicate that a grand wedding was about to take place. Not far away, on a comfortable lounge chair, Li Jing was lying leisurely, with a newspaper covering his face, enjoying a short nap. However, if you look closely at the headlines in the newspapers, you will be shocked. Akoku dies and the 5 emperors ascend the throne. Drought Jack was killed by the sword ghost Li Jing with a sword, and his life and death are unknown, the world's best swordsman Hawkeye. Admit that I am not the best in the world. These headlines have undoubtedly become a hot topic of discussion and have the entire world excited. In the laboratory, Big Wolf was carefully debugging certain data, with a focused look on his face. At the stern of the boat, Squidward picked up the flute again and started playing. The melodious music echoed in the air, seeming to add a sense of tranquility and harmony to the whole scene. At the same time, in the botanical garden, Sadako tied up her long black hair neatly and wore a white dress. Standing there quietly, feeling the breeze blowing gently on my face, I couldn't help but feel a faint joy in my heart. The breeze blew and the leaves rustled, as if they were playing a natural concert for her. The weather is really good today. Sadako closed her eyes and listened to the sound of wind, leaves and waves in the distance, and her mood gradually became happy. In the kitchen, Ice Bear is teaching SpongeBob cooking skills, although SpongeBob always turns different types of ingredients into delicious Krabby Patties or indescribable things. But the white bear didn't feel annoyed or dissatisfied. Instead, he patiently guides SpongeBob to learn how to make more delicious dishes. At the door of the kitchen, Patrick was lying leisurely on the floor, wearing colorful clothes, looking very interesting. It's just that his body is now colorful, because every time an experiment fails, Patrick will eat the failed products without hesitation. On the other side, in the trophy storage area, Tren added Paramesh's wind fruit and wave fruit to his collection with a low expression. If I had known, I would have warned Li Jing earlier that day, and I would have almost harvested an ancient animal-type devil fruit. Tren couldn't help but feel a little regretful, but then he shook his head, then gently patted his cheek, and then walked out of the trophy storage place. When Tren stepped onto the lift provided, he felt the sea breeze and the warmth of the sun. He squinted his eyes and enjoyed the tranquility and comfort of this moment. As the lifting platform slowly rose, he finally returned to the deck. He looked around and found that Li Jing was taking a nap on the recliner next to him, with a faint smile hanging on the corner of his mouth. This guy is so leisurely and at ease. He then walked past Li Jing gently without disturbing his sweet dream. Then he jumped and landed on the grass of the island. Tren stepped on the soft green grass and felt the solidity and vitality of the earth. Breathe the fresh air deeply, as if you can smell the fragrance of nature. Everything here made him feel that today was a good day, and then Tren clicked on the system interface. 185% summon, later Jack provided another 15%. As for Baron Eggman, this guy didn't even consider coming to the Black Pearl. Instead, he threw the invitation from a distance and suddenly threw something on the deck and ran away. No matter what, this time, the gold will definitely come out. With the luck that hit his soul the last time, gambled, Tren instantly pressed the summon button. In an instant, the familiar magic circle opened again, or because we were not on the ship, this time the magic circle was larger than before. As a burst of light flashed, a girl with red eyes, long golden hair, and dragon horns on her head, dressed as a maid, stood in front of Tren. Captain. Thor looked at Tren standing in front of him, tears quietly rolling in the corners of his eyes. Then someone swooped over, and she hugged Tren tightly, her tone slightly choked. I've been looking for you for a long, long time. Tren was startled by the sudden hug, but he still gently stroked Thor's head and comforted him. I'm back, it's okay. Well, but, however, the next second, a powerful force burst out from Thor. She hugged Tren's arms tightly and exerted force, and then the powerful impact instantly carried Tren out dozens of sea miles. I finally found you. Thor's voice was full of excitement and joy, and her tears burst out like a dam and turned into crystal teardrops floating in the air. Tren was held by Thor, feeling her warm embrace, and felt moved in his heart. Yes, he was really moved. Name. Thor, dragon maid from the Kobayashi family. Ability. Maid service, cooking. Strength. Tren is alive and pirates are alive, Tren is dead and pirates are dead, pirates refer to the world of pirates. A shock wave flashed past and set off a wave of air. Li Jing on the deck was awakened with a confused look on his face. What? Passed over my head. It seems to be the leader. Timo shouted. Since when did the leader have such speed? Li Jing scratched his head after hearing Timo's words. P.S. As of 10:30 p.m., the vote count was Gengar 48, Thor 59, and Steve 41. So Dragon Maid Thor wins. Of course, this is not a vote for choosing a chef, because the characters participating in the vote this time are all on the big list, but the order of appearance is decided by you. In addition, the next summons is coming soon, so Gengar with the second most votes will be directly elected. Steve can only be ranked third. Next is the plot line of War on the Top and Four Emperors. Tom and Jerry will also appear in War on the Top. Thank you all for your support, see you next time. Chapter 120 Fuse. Advertise here. On the Black Pearl, with the return of Thor, everyone put down what they were doing and came together to reminisce with this lovely dragon maid, hidden boss. As for Tren, well, he was spread out on the recliner like mud, and it was obvious that he had not yet reacted to the shock. Thor, was it hard to come all the way here? Sadako stroked her orange hair. As soon as I received the news from the leader, I set off. It took me a long time to find him. Thor lowered his head and sighed. Just come back. I'll play a song for you alone tonight. Squidward specially wore the new performance clothes he bought last time in the Sabayati Islands. White Bear will cook what Thor likes to eat tonight. Looking at Thor, White Bear smiled. Wow. The leader made another sound that did not belong to a bear, but Thor looked at everyone who was caring for her with tears in his eyes again. Everyone. I like it the most. Thor then hugged Tuanzi and softened him, but the only ones surrounding Thor were Sadako, Squidward, Timo, and White Bear. As for Big Big Wolf, Li Jing, SpongeBob SquarePants and Patrick Star, they stood aside and smiled without coming forward. Big Big Wolf, Thor is back. Come up and say hello. Li Jing pushed his elbow against the Big Big Wolf beside him. Haha, you are the deputy commander. This should be done by you. Grey Wolf remained calm and smiled. Kaido. Patrick must never make trouble in front of Thor in the future. Do you still remember the last time she used you to clean the toilet and me to wash the dishes? SpongeBob said slowly in his unique low tone. Patrick will never forget it for a moment. Patrick's eyes widened, which also explains why the last time Tren said he used him to wipe things, he recalled a memory scene. In the memories of the group members, when Thor was wandering around in a hood instead of a maid uniform, Li Jing, Big Wolf, Tom and Jerry plus Steve, the five of them barely managed to win the full-out Thor. You. Why are you so far away from me? Suddenly Thor turned his head and looked at Li Jing and others with a pouted mouth. Haha, we are thinking about what program we need to arrange to welcome you tonight, Thor. Li Jing said with a smile. That's right, that's what I said too. Big Wolf nodded in agreement. As for SpongeBob and Patrick, the pretending game. That night, Black Pearl, restaurant. A grand welcome banquet was going on, and everyone gathered together in a warm and cheerful atmosphere. At the same time, Thor also habitually plays her role as a maid, moving gracefully among the crowd, showing off her penultimate professional skills. Thor's movements are skillful and smooth. She skillfully pours wine and serves food for Tren, and communicates with everyone with her gentle voice from time to time, which makes people feel very comfortable. Especially the five platelets, they looked at Thor with admiration shining in their eyes. At the back, these five little guys shouted, "Sister Thor," one after another, their voices were clear and full of dependence. Ah, you are too young to be a maid. Looking at the cute platelets, Thor felt both shy and happy. Sister Thor, the platelets circled around and surrounded Thor. You are not good at being cute. Thor covered his cheeks with his hands, a faint blush appeared on his cheeks, looking both cute and charming. The green dragon tail behind her flapped the ground crazily and quickly, making a powerful sound as her mood changed. At the main seat of the dining table, Tren looked at the plate covered in front of him, hesitating, and then glanced at Thor's tail. Are you still there? Seeing that it was still fine, he immediately breathed a sigh of relief, then picked up the tableware and opened it, and then a steaming dragon tail meat lay quietly in it. Ice Bear can only say that Thor made this in the kitchen a few hours ago. Seeing Tren's expression, Ice Bear shrugged helplessly. Thor. While Tren and the others were celebrating Thor's return on the Black Pearl, there was a place called BannerO Island on the distant Grand Line. The island originally consisted of a quiet town and a peaceful island. However, at this time, BannerO Island had changed beyond recognition. The once peaceful town has now been completely destroyed, and countless blazing fires are raging across the land. The flames mercilessly devoured everything, and neither buildings nor vegetation could escape its clutches. The fire grew larger and larger, gradually spreading to the entire island, turning it into a sea of fire. And in the midst of the fire that filled the sky, a mysterious darkness quietly emerged. It shuttled through the sea of fire, devouring everything that came into contact with it. It is like a greedy giant beast, constantly growing and making people feel an unspeakable fear. Teach. Ace looked at the arrogant black beard in front of him, his heart burning with anger, and he spat out a mouthful of blood, staining the ground red. He widened his eyes and glared at Blackbeard, his eyes full of anger and unwillingness. Thief, ha ha ha. Ace, this is the fruit I want to get at all costs. Blackbeard laughed arrogantly, and the laughter resounded throughout the battlefield. Underfoot and behind you, dark water covered the sky, as if the entire world was shrouded in darkness. The reason why I stayed on Whitebeard's ship for more than 10 years is because I think this fruit is most likely to appear there. Blackbeard said proudly, with a confident smile on his face. So you killed Sage? Ace shouted, his voice full of grief and anger, and his eyes revealed endless killing intent, which made people shudder. But this murderous intention only stays on the surface and cannot pose a real threat to Blackbeard. If I could, I wouldn't want to do that. But the situation forced me to make that decision. Moreover, it can be said that this fruit chose me. It is precisely because of my decisiveness that I have become the strongest person today. Blackbeard looked at the dark fruit in his hand with emotion. And you are a small proof. Blackbeard sneered, the corners of his mouth raised slightly, showing a trace of contempt. The two fought from noon to night on BannerO Island, and the results have already appeared. Captain, hurry up, Marine will be here soon. Fan Oka looked at the scene in front of him, his face still had the same dead expression, and his tone was calm. Marine. It's Marine I'm waiting for. Ha ha ha. Blackbeard laughed wildly, and the laughter echoed throughout the battlefield. His left hand suddenly stretched out, and a black water flow quickly formed like a whirlpool, sweeping towards the exhausted Ace. Dark water. As Blackbeard roared, the black water instantly sucked Ace towards Blackbeard. Ace tried to struggle, but his strength was exhausted and he was unable to break free from this strange restraint. Bang! With a dull loud noise, Ace was forcefully sucked in front of him by Blackbeard. Next, the drama begins. Blackbeard's eyes were full of pride and cruelty. He stared at Ace with greed in his eyes. Then, without hesitation, he stretched out his right hand, grabbed Ace's head, and slammed him to the ground, causing a cloud of dust to fly up. Chapter 121 Marine Headquarters Meeting. Advertise here. In the year 1520 of the lunar calendar, there are still 3 months until the next calendar year arrives. This day is destined to become a turning point in history. First, Luffy and other 11 supernova pirates from the evil generation appeared. And they gathered in the Sabayati Islands. Then in this turbulent era, one of the most dazzling stars was Blackbeard Teach. He successfully captured Ace, the 2nd Division captain of the Whitebeard Pirates, on Banneroo Island, and handed him over to Marine and World Government. In exchange, he gained the status of 7 Warlords of the Sea. Secondly, Marine did not announce this. Marine Headquarters, Marineland. Just when Tren led the adventure group into the dangerous new world and started a desperate battle with the strong Akoku pirates. Marine has not been idle anymore. They actively carry out the world recruitment activity and inject fresh blood into Marine. These recruits not only brought strong combat effectiveness, but also improved the personnel who were originally direct members of the headquarters. For example, Colonel T. Bone of the headquarters, who participated in the Battle of Red Harbor, capital of 7 Waters, and other battles, was promoted from commander and captain to major general of the headquarters due to his outstanding performance. Similarly, Smoker from Rogue Town was promoted to major general of the headquarters due to merit, while Dasky was promoted to lieutenant commander of the headquarters. Even Kirby and others were awarded the rank of lieutenant junior grade in the Marine headquarters because they were Garp's apprentices. Their growth rate is amazing, which seems to indicate brilliant achievements in the future, but it also proves that the factions in Marine are becoming more and more obvious. I knew this guy was not simple. At the door of the conference room, Smoker smoked a cigar and stared at a photo on the public railing. The man in the photo was standing on the deck with a smile on his face. This announcement only contains the reward orders for all members of the Tren Adventure Group, and the one at the top is the one with a bounty of 3.4 billion belly, the pure, evil, Jenny Tron. Perhaps Mr. Tren also has his own difficulties. Dasky on the side looked at Tren, who was already a bit handsome in appearance, and couldn't help but recall the first time they met in Rogtown 2 years ago. Scene. What's the reason? He's obviously an ambitious guy. Smoker angrily smoked another cigar. Sooner or later I will arrest him personally, as well as the Straw Hat Kid. Tren Adventure Group is scary. At this time, Kirby, who came with Garp, heard Smoker's conversation and couldn't help but stepped forward and saluted. Mainbu Lieutenant Junior Grade Kirby. Yeah, looking at the boy with pink hair and a cross-shaped scar on his forehead, Smoker and Dusky nodded. There is a big gap in military ranks between them, so Smoker doesn't have to return the favor. I participated in the Battle of Red Harbor. The strength of Jenny Tron's group is very terrifying. They are not easy to deal with. Kirby continued. That's why we are Marine. Smoker Kaido said. In fact, how could Smoker not know Kirby's name? After all, many people saw this guy kneeling and crying at that time, but the reason why they were polite was because Smoker and Dusky are now under the supervision of Counselor Crane and Kirby is Garp's apprentice, so Marine still needs to be more polite. Oh my, why don't you go in? At this time, Kizaru, the last to arrive among the generals, stood behind the 3 of them, wearing light sunglasses and curling his mouth. General Kizaru. The 3 of them were startled, and then they all backed away. In the conference room, everyone is here today, including Zephyr, who is about to rebel, but except for the Lieutenant General, everyone else is standing and listening. As the warring statesman of Fleet Admiral, he sat in the main seat as always, followed by the junior generals, but today there were 2 more chairs after the 3 senior generals. One of them is a blind man dressed as a warrior, with short black hair and a beard around his mouth. His eyes are closed. If he opens his eyes, only the whites of his eyes will be exposed. There is an X-shaped scar on the left side of the forehead, which extends to both eyes. The tall figure is wearing a lavender kimono, a black and purple sash, and a marine coat. The lining of the marine coat is purple, and a purple scarf is wrapped around his neck. Wearing white gauntlets on his hands, bandages on his arms, wooden shoes on his feet, and holding a staff and knife like a blind stick, he is now peaceful. The other one is more chic, with high eyebrows, depressed eyelids, and slightly thick lips. He has slightly messy dark green curly hair, wears sunglasses, holds a cigarette in his mouth, is tall and strong, and has slender legs. The upper body is naked, with a tattoo of Heart of Death River on the left side. He is wearing General Marine's coat of justice and has a katana on his waist. Wearing dark pants with a petal pattern on the left leg, he often looks towards Akainu, his eyes full of admiration. Warring States also looked at the 2 of them for the first time, with relief in his eyes. Ru stood up and introduced. After a decision from the top, because Tren and his group are now vaguely expected to become the 5 emperors and break the pattern of the 4 emperors, the Marine headquarters will have 2 more generals. Sengoku said with a serious face. After saying this, Warring States was actually very happy. After all, adding 2 more generals is definitely a good thing for Marine, and the follow-up matters will be easier to handle. Of course, the most important thing now is to solve Ace's matter. But currently only he knows about it. Thinking of this, Sengoku continued. Marine Headquarters General, Fujitora, smiled. Marine Headquarters General, Green Bull, Aramaki. Hearing this, everyone was stunned. They couldn't believe their ears. The Warring States period actually announced that 2 new generals would be added. This is something unprecedented. As soon as Sengguo finished speaking, the scene fell into silence. Everyone stared at Sengguo with wide eyes, an expression of disbelief on their faces. You know, the tradition of the 3 major generals has continued for many years. Of course, Gion and Cake, who are candidates for generals, have already been given ideological work. As for what kind of work? Of course, they were allowed to fight, and in the end, Dion and Yishao faced each other for a while. But the situation was different with Jiaji. He was easily crushed by Aramu. Seeing that the people below did not have too many objections, Warring States also breathed a sigh of relief, but soon became serious again. There was a hint of worry and heaviness in his eyes, as if something major was about to happen. Of course, if it were just this matter, we wouldn't ask everyone to come over. Warring State's voice was low and powerful, with a kind of majesty that could not be ignored. Everyone immediately focused their attention, knowing that what they were going to say next was definitely not trivial. Warring States took a deep breath and continued. I asked everyone to come here because of another matter. This matter is related to the situation of the entire world and its future direction. His words aroused the interest of the people present, and they all opened their eyes, looking forward to what Sengguo would say next. Sengoku's eyes swept over everyone, and finally landed on Garp. Garp frowned and looked at his old friend Sengoku in confusion, not knowing what he wanted to say. Sengoku nodded slightly, as if he was sorting out his thoughts, and then slowly spoke. Blackbeard Teach, who betrayed the Whitebeard pirates, successfully defeated Fire Fist Ace, the captain of Whitebeard's 2nd Division, on Banaro Island. In exchange for this, he obtained the position of Shichibukai with the world government. Then the higher-ups decided that we would carry out the execution in Malinfando in 2 months' time. Chapter 122 Invitation Letter. Advertise here. As soon as this statement came out, there was an uproar in the conference room. Everyone in the conference room had shocked expressions on their faces, obviously very surprised by the news. But before Warring States finished speaking, he continued to speak, because his identity is. Bang! Before Warring States finished speaking, Garp smashed the conference table with his fist. Warring States. Garp. The two looked at each other, but Sengoku still said the next thing, because they were righteous Marines, and everyone needed to know this in advance, so Sengoku shouted. Portgas D. Ace's true identity is, One Piece Gall D. Roger's son. Warring States' voice was like thunder, exploding in the conference room, and everyone was stunned by the news. What? How is that possible? The son of One Piece. The generals looked at each other with disbelief on their faces. Garp sat there. His face was frighteningly gloomy, his hands were clenched into fists, and his veins were bulging. Warring States looked at everyone and said seriously, this is a fact, we have investigated it clearly. Portgas D. Ace is the biological son of Gall D. Roger. Quote. The conference room fell into a dead silence, only the sound of Garp's heavy breathing echoed in the air. Oh my gosh, is it so exciting at the beginning today? Kizaru smacked his lips, still shocked in his eyes. After a long time, Akainu was the first to break the silence. He stood up and said with firm eyes, no matter whose son it is, as long as it is a pirate, it must be destroyed. Green Bull nodded and agreed. Yes, pirates are evil existences, I support it. Aokiji and Fujitora agreed. Justice is justice. Seeing that the generals were the first to express their stance, other generals nodded in agreement. Sengoku glanced at Garp and said slowly and softly, Garp, I know your relationship with Ace, but as a Marine, we must stick to our positions and principles. Garp raised his head, a trace of pain flashed in his eyes, but he still nodded and said solemnly, I understand, Warring States. Sengoku took a deep breath and said, well, now let's start discussing how to deal with the problem of Portgas D. Ace. Fierce discussion erupted in the conference room again, with everyone expressing their opinions and suggestions. Garp sat there quietly, filled with contradictions and struggles. He has always regarded Ace as his own son, and this kind of blow is undoubtedly a huge blow to him. However, as a Marine, he cannot violate his duties and beliefs. In the end, the meeting decided that the 3 generals would escort Portgas D. Ace and escort him back to Impel Down. No one will tell the results of the meeting at Marine headquarters. At the same time, on the Black Pearl. Tren looked at the invitation in his hand and frowned. Auntie's wedding banquet. How many times has she been married now? Captain. Xiaohei jumped out of the ship, originally planning to ask what the next way was. As a result, when he saw the invitation letter in Tren's hand, he was shocked, and then he jumped slightly and snatched the invitation letter from his hand. Captain, how could you do this? Are you finally going to? Ha! Before Xiaohei could finish speaking, Tren directly hit Xiaohei's forehead with a snap of his fingers. What are you thinking about? This is someone else's invitation. Xiaohei screamed in pain when he was hit, and looked at Tren aggrievedly, his eyes full of disappointment and confusion. This cold palace is getting cold again. Go ahead, didn't I say this was someone else's invitation? Tren shook his head helplessly and explained. Xiaohei was immediately discouraged after hearing this, but still asked curiously, then do we decide to go to this place next? I don't know, and this invitation seems to have been sent to us 3 days ago when we were still in the waters near Beehive Island. What are you giving? At this time, Thor, dressed as a maid, came over with a cup of steaming black tea. This is made by Li Jing. I think the leader would like to drink it if he is basking in the sun alone. Yeah, looking at Thor, Tren nodded. Over the past few days, he had become accustomed to Thor's care as a maid. Sometimes he would run to his room in his pajamas for various reasons, calling it perfect. Take care of. Seeing Tren drinking tea, Thor subconsciously picked up the invitation on the table and mentioned it casually. Who sent this invitation? It hasn't been opened yet. Bump. After a moment, the teacup in Tren's hand suddenly exploded, and the tea inside splashed everywhere. Captain. Thor turned back with a smile on his face, staring at Tren closely like a torch, and the smile on his face became brighter. What's wrong? Looking at Thor's terrifying eyes, Tren couldn't help but swallowed, and then stood up slowly. He just wanted to grab Xiao He beside him as a shield, but this guy was already there. He sensed something was wrong and ran away. You don't want to explain. Thor clutched the letter in the invitation tightly and raised it in front of Tren. Although the letter was wrinkled due to his gripping it too tightly, the words on it could still be read clearly. The BIGMOM pirates sincerely invite Jenny Tren, the leader of the Tren Adventure Group, to attend Charlotte Linlin's 43rd wedding banquet. During the wedding reception, we will have my 9th, 12th, or 14th daughter, Charlotte Smoothie, responsible for entertaining you. Of course, if possible, we, close black lens bracket. Thor said while holding the invitation letter high. Invitation, Captain. After saying that, the invitation letter suddenly burned and turned into ashes in an instant, as if it had never existed. Ahem. Thor, do you think I will be that kind of person? I am a promising young man. Tren explained seriously. Really? Don't you have any curiosity or ideas? Looking at Trent, who had a dull face, Thor suddenly put his face almost close to Trent's face, and his amber eyes were even more deadly. Stare at him. Tren frowned and looked at the big plate in front of him, and asked incomprehensively, You don't believe me? What do you think? Thor said angrily. Tren shrugged and said nonchalantly, Well, I don't even know what the content of the letter is. If you hadn't just opened it, I wouldn't have known it. Then prove it. Toll straightened up and took out a dinner plate, which contained another piece of fried tail meat. Tren, wait, isn't that what you had in mind? As Tren spoke, he took a step back and lifted up a certain dragon's skirt, and took a closer look. Sure enough, it was true. Chapter 123 Departure from Fishman Island. Advertise here. No more love. After being scolded for a while, Thor's little face wrinkled up, his little mouth pouted, and he turned his face to the side, his little hands poked helplessly, and his heart was full of grievance and helplessness. He looked like he didn't want Tren to see his pitiful look, but in fact he was secretly thinking, did something go wrong with my plan? How could it be so damn close to succeeding? Thor, actually we can try making dumplings. Looking at Thor's expression, Li Jing, who had been staying aside silently, whispered. White Bear knows how to bake. White Bear added as he walked over carrying a plate of toasted bread. I also think this is a good idea. Timo slid down the rope and stretched his little hand towards the plate with toast. But, the captain will know it. Sadako got out from behind the side door. As a sole body, she didn't even walk on the Black Pearl. Sister Sadako, believe me, as long as we keep our mouths tight, it's impossible for the group leader to know. Timo said while biting the toast. Yeah, Patrick nodded, SpongeBob and I think so too. We will never let the leader know that you are going to wrap the tail meat in dumplings and give it to him. That's right, I won't reveal the information that we all worked together to hide from the leader. After shouting, SpongeBob also made a zipper to his mouth. The moment Patrick and SpongeBob's voices came out, Thor and the others paused and stared at these two big mouths. The plan is ruined. Timo pulled the rope and returned directly to the observation deck. White Bear should continue delivering toast. After all, Mr. Big Wolf is still in the laboratory. White Bear smiled slightly, then turned and left. You two are going to have a hard day today. Li Jing looked at Patrick and SpongeBob and patted their shoulders. Patrick, I have a bad feeling. SpongeBob's body suddenly trembled. No, SpongeBob, it's just because it's too cold. Patrick yawned. Really? SpongeBob was about to turn around, but his and Patrick's heads were caught by Thor. Ah, I heard that the platelets need some tools over at the restaurant, so I might need to trouble you. Thor smiled and dragged Patrick and SpongeBob down to the lift. Dump. SpongeBob was about to shout, but his mouth was blocked by a piece of toast. As for Patrick, he had already resigned himself to his fate and happily ate the toast that blocked his mouth. As the people on the deck dispersed, Tren also knocked on the hull of the ship, shaking out a certain elf hiding inside. Hey, Captain, are you still alive? Xiao He looked at Tren, with a flattering smile on his face, while twisting his body and blinking. Tren rolled his eyes and said angrily, Why, you have other ideas. And you were running very fast just now. Xiao He quickly explained, Aren't you afraid of the negative impact? A good member will look at the situation. Tren snorted, expressing his dissatisfaction, but did not pursue it any further. He knew that Xiao He had such a personality. Although it sometimes gave him a headache, he was generally relatively reliable. It's okay. Then Tren touched Xiao He's head, it's important that you have a good rest and take care of yourself. Because tonight I have to work hard to seduce some creatures. Quote. I knew it. Hearing that a certain elf was going to make a nest at night, he was about to get back into the Black Pearl, but Tren grabbed his feet and lifted him up. Okay. I called you out to tell you that I already know where to go next. Really? Xiao He, who was moving crazily, suddenly stopped and stared at Tren from a reverse perspective. Is there such a thing as false? Tren said, putting Xiao He down, and then continued, let's go next. Go to the Cake Island where the invitation is sent, right? Hee hee. I knew the group leader still had ideas. Don't worry, I wrote down all the contents when Thor opened the invitation, so I know you best. Xiao He said excitedly. Come on, I'm not interested in Big Mom, let's go to Fishman Island. Tren waved his hand and said. Fishman Island. Tren's words made Xiao He stunned, and he suddenly understood. Donnie Yen pointed at people. Oh, forget it, Li Jing. Bring me my fishing rod. ... After a while, Xiao He sat on the guardrail with a serious face, holding seaweed on his head. Fishman Island, right, leader. Yeah, Tren nodded, and on the deck behind him, Li Jing was dividing the body of some kind of large fish, while Bai Shang was commanding. Wouldn't it be better if this was the case earlier? If we want to go to Fishman Island, we need coating, but the strength of the coating also represents the pressure tolerance we can bear when we go into the seabed. Xiao He explained seriously. But the Black Pearl can customize its route, so we don't have to worry about getting lost in the pitch black sea. But Fishman Island is in a gap under the Red Earth continent, so. Don't worry about it. I've told Wei Tailong about the coating a long time ago. He has probably made something completely crossing in the laboratory. As for the Poseidon species at the bottom of the sea, they should all have the biological instinct of seeking good luck and avoiding evil. When saying this, Tren couldn't help but chuckle. Then there is no problem. Let's cruise at a constant speed to the diving area first. Seeing that Tren was not worried, Xiao He still faced the small virtual screen in front of him and operated. No need to go to such trouble, just use the door fruit to jump briefly. I know this function, but the controllability of the ability function is too poor. After all, it is a short-term ability taken from the devil fruit, so the positioning can only be a rough idea. Xiao He explained. That's faster than driving slowly like this. If you can save some distance, just save some distance. Okay. Xiao He nodded solemnly, and then his whole body was like smoke, quickly escaping into the Black Pearl and disappearing in an instant. As Xiao He activated this jumping function, the space around the Black Pearl, which was still quietly staying on the sea, began to distort. At the same time, the Menmen fruit, which was originally stored in the trophy storage point, was temporarily taken away from the glass cover as a core ability. Coordinates 145.66. Start. Xiao He entered the destination coordinates and then lightly clicked the OK button. In an instant, a dazzling light flashed, and a large door that just fit into the Black Pearl's hull appeared out of thin air. Then the Black Pearl quickly sailed into the door like a meteor, and then appeared in another in the blink of an eye. On an unfamiliar sea. Chapter 124 Broadcast Pirates. Advertise here. New World. Sea areas. The sea breeze gently blew over Tren's face, and accompanied by the sound of seagulls squawking in the distance, Trent stood on the deck and blinked. I thought I could jump directly to Fishman Island. At this time, Xiao He also came out and shook it directly to his head. So here is. Tren looked at the endless sea. If it weren't for the cry of seagulls, Tren would have been worried that they had jumped to a sea area with no islands nearby. There are seagulls on the sea surface, which means there are islands or high rocks nearby. Sail forward for dozens of nautical miles, and you can sneak into the Fishman Island from wherever you are. Captain, I have made what you want. At this moment, Big Wolf slowly walked out of the lift platform. Since the laboratory is located on the 3rd floor, he needs to use a lift to get here. Hearing the voice of Big Wolf, Tren immediately asked Xiao He to set the route, then turned around and said with a smile, it seems that Big Wolf is still very powerful. You can make something in such a short time. Quote, it's just an anti-pressure shield. It's just a piece of cake for me. It's not as troublesome as upgrading Teemo's weapons. Grey Wolf was full of confidence in his invention. Then, he said triumphantly, you'd better see the effect first. Captain. After saying that, he directly threw a ball in his hand upwards. In an instant, an energy-like protective film quickly rose up, directly wrapping the entire Black Pearl tightly. Teemo, who was standing on the observation deck, saw this scene and couldn't help but exclaimed, wow. It's so sci-fi. And Squidward, who was taking a nap in his place, also lifted up his blindfold, I wonder if Big Grey Wolf can research an invention that can calm SpongeBob. This King's energy shield can isolate everything outside the Black Pearl, and it will also show a corresponding protective color in the eyes of other creatures. It can be said that there is basically no problem. Not bad. Tren looked at the protective cover and couldn't help but nodded. It will also be convenient for us to go to Fishman Island. Are you going to Fishman Island next? Big Wolf raised his eyebrows curiously after hearing Tren's words, and then put away the protective cover. Where is Fishman Island? A fairy tale world. Thor, who had just finished teaching SpongeBob and Patrick, approached him with excitement. While Tron was communicating with the two, and Teemo was chatting with Squidward, a pirate flag emerged from the water in the distance, with a burning musical note painted on the black flag. The shape of the ship is also unique. The bow is engraved with vivid musical note patterns, exuding an artistic atmosphere. And as the hull broke out of the sea, the coating on the hull also shattered, and the flags rustled with the sea breeze. New World. The pirates on the ship were extremely excited to celebrate that they had crossed the undersea tunnel and arrived in the New World. Ah, bah, 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 bah. We broadcast that the pirates have arrived in the New World. There is a Long Hand Clan man on the bow of the ship. He is dressed in Chinese attire, with the word Yin embroidered on his chest, wearing headphones and black glasses. Teeth like piano keys, speaking with a slightly tongue-in-cheek tone. The generation of evil, one of the supernovas, the captain of the radio pirates, Hai Ming, Scullachman Apu, bounty of 198 million Baileys. Mr. Apu. The crew members of the radio pirates all use the title, Mr., to call Apu. Ah, everyone. As soon as Apu finished laughing, he saw his men, and their expressions were not right at this time. So they turned around in an instant, and as expected, the huge black pearl with BGM was standing in front of them. Isn't this Apu's radio pirates? Or is it Paramesh's musical instrument fruit users? Tren looked at the pirate ship, especially the Captain Apu, with a harmonious smile. Next to Tren stood the frowning grey wolf and Thor, who was wearing a maid outfit and had a slightly curious expression. Tren Adventure Group. Looking at Tren's harmonious face, Apu's voice spread throughout the cabin, and everyone's faces showed a solemn look. The supernova has come to New World, which means that you are done with the Sabayati Islands. Tren stepped towards the bow of the ship and looked at Apu. Mr. Apu. Everyone in the Broadcasting Pirates group couldn't help but swallow their saliva when looking at the young man on the Black Pearl. After all, the person standing in front of them is Jenny Tren, who is called pure evil. In addition, the Tren Adventure Group defeated the great pirate Akoku not long ago, and is now known as the Fifth Emperor of the Sea. Oh, it seems like today is not a good day at all. I didn't expect to meet you here. Apu forced a smile. He has heard that 3 days ago, that guy kid mocked the red-haired Shanks for breaking his hand because he met the red-haired pirates returning to New World. As a result, his arm was directly broken by Ben Beckman, the second in command of the red-haired pirates. Does this guy also want me to leave something behind before I can leave? Arms. Thighs. Apu 5%, summon 90%. Haha, this guy. Looking at the system's mental emotion prompts, Tren was embarrassed to laugh, but just raised his hand. Apu, who was already nervous, instantly raised his hand and knocked on his chest, and his chest also turned into a drum due to the power of the musical instrument fruit. Scrape plate. Explode. Immediately as the sound spread, an explosion occurred in front of Tren. It succeeded. Looking at the explosion smoke on the Black Pearl, Apu's expression slowly changed from horror to surprise. He was absolutely right. Tren did not use his armor to protect himself at all, and his battle music completely shocked Tren. Mr. Apu. The members of the radio pirates were shocked when they saw this scene. This is Jenny Tren, who has a bounty of 3.5 billion. And their captain actually hurt such a person. Ah bah bah. Apu smiled and danced with his long hands. He seemed to find it very interesting, and his laughter echoed in the air. The appearance of Tren did change a lot of things, especially for those people known as the evil generation, whose characters were greatly affected. Because Tren is famous for killing the legendary pirate Golden Lion, he became the focus of everyone's attention. So these supernovas are full of confidence and ambition, and they think they may become the next Tren. This belief makes them more brave and bold, daring to challenge more powerful opponents. It is precisely based on this mentality that Kid will not hesitate to stop the returning red-haired man, firmly believing that he can compete with this legendary pirate and prove his strength. Similarly, when Apu met Tren, he did not shout and choose to run away immediately, but insisted on staying in place to observe the situation. All this is because Tren's career experience gave them courage and motivation. They aspire to achieve brilliant achievements like Tren and become a new generation of legends in the pirate world. Chapter 125, The Ninth Partner. Advertise here. Chapter 125. If the shadow moves on its own and smiles, it must be his fault. If you suddenly feel the cold approaching, it means that he is by your side, maybe it has placed a curse on you. Wandering for thousands of years, there is an ominous existence, clinging to the shadows waiting to kill people, an elf that humans are afraid of. No, he just didn't wait for his own partner. Poke ball. That's not something you should use on your friends. That's what the man told him. Okay. It's too late to mourn Steve who didn't appear. Now on the scene is the guy lurking in another dimension or shadow. Gengar. Appear. Apu 15%, summon 100%. This laughter is really noisy. At this time, the smoke dissipated. Tren lowered his eyes and patted the damaged underwear, then raised his eyes and locked Apu's eyes. But you seem to be very happy because you hit me. There's nothing wrong at all, it's impossible. Looking at Tren, whose only lining was damaged, Apu's eyes flashed with fear. But it soon stabilized, and everyone in the radio pirates looked at their captain and were ready to fight. This is no joke. To face them, we need to be determined to die. Apu said in a low voice, looking at the crew. Oh, the radio pirates shouted at the same time. This group. On the Black Pearl's side, Thor was about to send a dragon's breath to the radio pirates for a second, but Tren held his hand. It was Tren's move that made all the team members stop their movements when they noticed this scene on the deck of the Black Pearl. Timo on the observation deck and Squidward, who had taken off his blindfold, were also quiet and did not continue any further actions. Captain, come here. I just stayed in the laboratory for a while, and my hands are itchy. Dark green dark sources flowed in the palms of Grey Wolf's left and right palms, but Tren did not answer, and Grey Wolf did not move. Captain. On this side, Thor looked at Tren, who was holding him. He didn't understand at first. But when I saw my hand being held by Tren, I felt a little happy. No, how can you stop me just by holding me? You have to hold me. Thinking of this, Thor's expression changed. No, I have to kill them all. How dare he let the leader's clothes go, unforgivable. Looking at the pretentious Thor, Tren let go directly, okay. I'll do them. Huh, Thor turned into doo-doo and blinked, then silently walked to Tren, took his hand, and put it on his waist. His expression returned to normal, okay. The leader stopped me, oh, I won't take action this time. Big wolf on the side. There are stupid fruits on the stupid trees. Captain, I'm here. Big Grey Wolf was about to continue talking, but he saw Tren shaking his head with a smile. We don't need to take action because another guy is back. Another one. Big Grey Wolf muttered to himself, then chuckled and took the dark source back. And on the observation deck, Timo seemed to know something. The corner of his mouth raised, you just came back. It turns out that the moment the summon reached 100%, Tren clicked the summon button, and this time his partner was really unique. Name. Gengar, from Pokemon. Abilities. All skills Grandmaster, Dimensional Body, Super Evolution. Strength. Having lived for 1,000 years, his strength is indescribable. At the same time, on the note symbol of the pirate group, Apu looked at Tren, who had not yet made a move, and frowned. This guy. Immediately afterwards, Apu turned his teeth into piano keys and started tapping. Battle sound. Apu was about to activate his ability, but there was a coldness coming from his side. It wasn't cold, but the kind that felt like he was being targeted by something. He's still like this. On the Black Pearl, Sadako looked at this scene and smiled helplessly. Captain Apu. At this moment, a member of the radio pirates suddenly shouted. This shout made Apu frown in displeasure, and he said slightly reproachfully, didn't I tell you to call me sir? However, the crew member stuttered in response. No. Not. Your shadow is smiling. Upon hearing this, Apu turned around suddenly, with an expression of shock and fear on his face. I saw my own shadow blocked by the sail. At this moment, I was grinning with a big mouth, and those red eyes were wrong. This was not my shadow at all. Scraper. Explode. Apu instantly shot out a sound wave, followed by an explosion on the deck where his shadow was. But the shadow jumped directly into the shadow of another crew member. Everyone around the crew member immediately moved away, leaving him alone. And Apu didn't show any mercy, he directly hit the sonic wave on the crew member, and there was another explosion. The crew member vomited blood and fell down. Gengar. At this time, Gengar finally revealed his true face, with a purple-black body and red eyes. One pair of legs and a short and pointed tail, with some spine-like protrusions on the back, and the corners of the mouth were curved and raised with a smile. But now he is behind Apu. Asshole, what on earth are you? Apu just wanted to turn his head, but Gengar flicked a shadow ball with his left hand and directly pressed it into Apu's face. Gengar. Gengar shouted, followed by something like Apu's sound waves around his body, which were waves of evil. Come on. There's only one damn thing. Battle music. Apu covered his eyes and yelled while playing with his abilities, but Gengar wouldn't give them a chance. After all, he has lived for thousands of years, and besides, Gengar is an existence that robs people of their lives. I saw Gengar's body trembled and flashed, and then an unusual darkness erupted around his body, and Gengar's image also changed drastically. Evolved from a little fat man into a super Gengar. Each part of his body has spikes, and the lower part of his body is purple-red. The originally pointed tail grew spikes. There is a yellow gold coin-like object in the middle of the forehead, with a hole in the middle. At this moment, the music suddenly stopped, and the musical symbol deck became the domain of Super Gengar. In just an instant, the entire members of the radio pirates seemed to have lost their souls and their bodies became limp and weak. All their energy was sucked away by Gengar. They couldn't even stay standing and fell to the ground one after another. Don't come here, Apu shouted in horror, but it was too late. Gengar had already appeared beside him, stretched out a hand to grab his foot, and then gave him a hard shake and threw him towards the Black Pearl in the distance. Apu drew an arc in the air and finally fell heavily on the Black Pearl. Gengar. Gengar also smiled at Tren. Welcome back, you guy. Tren smiled softly. Gengar had the ability to communicate spiritually, but he could only communicate with Tren.